Hi, and welcome to Dirty Little Secrets. I'm your host, Captain Jack Lantern, but you can just call me Captain Jack. In the months ahead, I will take you places in your mind that vary across the emotional and mental scale from drama and comedy to lands of thrills and chills, warm glows and happy endings, sudden surprises and shocking truths. These are dirty little secrets. This trip is not intended for children. If you're easily shocked, you may want to turn away. I recommend all viewers be at least 18 years old. These are Dirty Little Secrets, and I am your host, Jack Orion Lantern. Tonight, this is a little stream of consciousness play with me doing two parts, albeit badly. God help me. And it's called A Little Talk with God. Just want to say up front, this is not a sermon or a teaching. This is just for entertainment and a few laughs between friends. Dirty Little Secrets is meant to be casual and fun. At times I hope to have select guests on. Things will get better in the equipment area. I have new equipment, but just have not gotten used to having board time with them. So we are flying bare bones tonight. I have a new mixer in the next room, but the instructions are rather cryptic, and I'm going to have to play with it for a while before I'll be able to live with it. And that's funny because I've been on the air at 6 radio stations in the past and 2 nightclubs as a mixing nightclub DJ host. I worked at JD Penguins in Florida, and I worked at the XYZ Club in Lakeland, Florida. Average attendance at night, 1,500 customers coming and going. And I was the only DJ there. And also, I was on the air at 100,000 watt FM stereo stations and little AM 5,000 watt stations around the Tampa Bay area. Actually, I started out in Muhlenberg College in Allentown. While I was there, that little college radio station, WMUH, I did the AM and the FM in subsequent years. More on that later. But besides those jobs as DJing, I've spent countless hours volunteering to run sound at 2 different churches in Florida. One of them now runs about 5,000 people on a Sunday and has a facility that puts Joel Osteen's Lakewood to shame. Not because it's bigger or its size, but because of its architecture. It's a beautiful, modern, wide pan type of interior with all the special acoustic treatments. Joel Osteen kind of just has this long rectangle, and the stage is at one end of it, or opposed to they could have put the stage on a side wall instead of him having a stage at the end of the rectangle, and they'd have a huge stage, but they figured, well, that's going to take away from seating. So when you're doing a rectangle seating, you got 3 sides of seats, all trying to face the stage. If you have all the stage on one side, on a long side, and the other 3 walls are seats, you can actually just slightly curve and pan all the seats in the auditorium towards the stage, and nobody has a bad seat. But that's why you wouldn't believe what Lakeland, Florida had for churches. There was a church down there that copied Radio City Music Hall, except there was a difference in seating between Radio City Music Hall and Carpenter's Home Church in Lakeland. Radio City Music Hall seated 6,000 people. Carpenter's Home Church in Lakeland seated 10,000 people. And they used professionally designed sound the whole way. JBL pods in the ceiling, They had Crown amplifiers, a whole room full of them, and they used Soundcraft mixers. Just a beautiful setup. And, Radio City Music Hall, their stage went up and down on hydraulics. Well, so did Carpenter's. Their stage went all the way down into the basement so they could load and unload trucks easily. And as a result, boy, they had everybody there. They had everybody who's anybody in the Christian music category came to Carpenter's home church, Lakeland. I mean, Jim and Tammy Baker came there. Uh, uh, the guy from Louisiana, what's his name? And Jimmy Swaggart, and the singers, anybody, all the top singers in Christendom came there. But Joel Osteen kind of just has that rectangle, and it's not ideal. First of all, a basketball arena is a horrible place for a concert. If you ever gone to a concert in a basketball arena, I have. The sound is just ricocheting everywhere. Nobody knows where to put the speakers, and so it's more ideal to have a facility designed from scratch to be a performance center or for sound. But just to brag a little, and if you don't blow your own horn, somebody's going to piss in it, right? Know what I mean? The first radio station I had any airtime on was my college radio station, as I said, in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And the next year, I was the AM program director. And the year after that, the FM program director. 300 watts of sizzling power. Bursting out over the city on WMUH FM stereo in the heart of the Lehigh Valley. Well, you could pick the station up like 15 miles away. It was a little weak, but, you know. There was a guy there 1 year ahead of me whose name was David Frick. You guys who read Rolling Stone magazine might recognize the name. He was a senior editor of Rolling Stone till he retired a few years ago. He bore an uncanny resemblance to Howard Stern. Same tall, skinny, Brillo pad hairdo as Howard Stern has. Tall, skinny guy dressed in black, was into progressive music. Well, that's not the bragging part yet. In the year 2000, okay, it was a few years after I was there as the AM FM program director. But in the year 2000, that station was named the #1 college radio station in the country. The #1 college radio station in the country, our country, this country, by Rolling Stone magazine. When I became the FM director some years before that, I basically wrote a small manual that I read to all of the on-air jocks at the beginning of the school year. It was very loosely run station. Basically, you were the boss of your own airtime, which is the way I wanted it. I didn't want to make it segueing formats, because students have to go to class and get on the air when they can do it, and they don't want to be pushed into a certain style of music. So we had everything. You had classical, progressive, you had jazz, you had people doing oldies back then, and then you had popular music or hit radio, and you also had hard rock. So you never knew what we were going to get. And so basically, I encouraged creativity and getting edgy. The only thing I hated was abusing the equipment. People who were rough on the styluses and the $20 needles that would have to be replaced every other week or something because they rammed it across a record, because the guy was with his girlfriend in the studio and her coat brushed the tables, or, he bumped the tables when he was walking around, and not showing up for airtime. I can forgive everything else, but if you were blowing through equipment because you were rough on it and didn't know how to handle expensive radio station stuff, and or you didn't show up for your airtime slot and you didn't have a damn good excuse, if you didn't show up for airtime, you were gone. We just got rid of you and put somebody else on who would show up. I hated an empty studio. If you can't do the show, get someone else to fill it in for you. So I like to think that somehow the standards I set way back when influenced the following generation of jocks and PDs. They took it more seriously. They didn't say, "Oh, this is just a college radio station." I mean, they ran that place better than some radio stations were run back then. They had a news department. They had people who came in just to write news. We had telegraphs there. Back then they had the whatever those things were that typed automatically, and teletypes, and all the news came out on these little sheets, and bells would ring. If there was a special event, there'd be a ding ding. So, I've been around. It's funny. I never stuck at one place for a long time because, well, I'm ADHD, and I get restless, and I take literally what anybody tells me. So when the program director of a radio station used to tell me, "Here's the clock. Here's when you play the music. Here's when the commercials are. Here's where the weather is. Here's the network news break in, and all that." It was all up on the wall, and they said, "Don't deviate from that." So I didn't. I went on the air, and it's like the Howard Stern movie, Private Parts, where he'd be in a radio station, and he was scared to death to deviate from the format, or so it became a time and temperature, and this was that was type of thing, where you just said it, 88 degrees outside, and coming up on 6 o'clock, and that was Steve Lawrence, "Go Away Little Girl," followed by the Beatles. "I Want to Hold Your Hand," or something like that. But so I was scared to death to deviate and to what do they call that when you say stuff off the cuff and it's not prepared? Improvise. I didn't try to improvise because I was afraid I'd get a call from the station manager and he'd go, "You're fired. Get out of the studio. So and so will be up to relieve you. You deviated from the clock to tell a joke. How dare you?" So, there's very poor communication between management and program directors and the jocks on the air. Nobody tells anybody anything. They just say, "Hey, the ratings are up, the ratings are down, your ratings suck, you're fired," or, "Your ratings are good. How'd you like a billboard and do the morning shift? You can do the morning show, we'll put you up on billboards." And that happened to me. I was 10,000 watt FM station in Jacksonville, and the station manager said, "I want to put you on. We listened to you, and they tried me out for a few nights at night to see what I sounded like on the air." He said, "We want to put you on in the morning. Your morning drive. You got to be here at 5 o'clock, and we want to put you up on billboards. We're going to take your picture and put it up all over Jacksonville. They'll see you as the face of WSVE." And and he said, there was something else. He said, "Morning drive. Oh, we want you to go sell advertising. And when you get time, when you're not in the studio, go out there and get ads." That wasn't a problem for me. I've done it before. But then he said, "Oh, and you're also the music director. We think your choice of music is knowledgeable and fabulous. So if you want the job, you're the music director. You got the morning drive. You're going up on billboards, and the other thing, whatever else I said, I don't know. It's so much." So I laid awake at night. That night, you tell that to somebody who's, how old was I then? Geez, I think I wasn't even 30 years old, at the time. I was like 29 or something. And all of a sudden the station is riding on you. The pressure's on you. We want you to carry the show for the day. You set it up in the morning with Morning Drive, and you pick out all the music for the station to play. Go sell advertising and enjoy your fame and fortune on billboards. Well, it, going back, you got to realize we're talking, this is 4 decades ago. Okay, I was 29 years old. And if I knew what I know now, if I knew that back then, of course I would have taken the job. And I would have said, guys, you're in good hands. I do know this music field well. I'll give you a great play set. The music that we put on will attract listeners. No problem being up on billboards. As far as selling ads, it's kind of a pain in the ass because when you're in a town like Jacksonville, um, I prefer to sell to like the Fortune 500. I don't like walking in mom and pop small stores in Main Street and, getting a couple $100 out of them. I like writing to the chains at the corporate headquarters and going, "Hey, we've got a actually a monopoly on an audience down here because we're the only ones that play this type of music and we cater to this type of person," which was true. We did. And I said, and do you know that 1 out of 2 people in the Jacksonville area are Baptists? 500,000 people, 250,000 Baptists, little AM station, 5,000 watts in Jacksonville, in the center of town, pumping out Baptist type of, uh, not curriculum, but music and programming for national ministries that they'd play the tapes of and stuff like that. And we were the only one doing that. There was 30 radio stations in Jacksonville. Well, 30, I'm counting the television stations too. There's like 4 or 6 TV stations. And so like 24 radio stations. And some were FM, some were AM. But remember, this was when was this? 1984, I'm talking about. So AM was still big back then. 40 years later, if you're on AM, man, you missed it. If you're over 40 years old and you're on an AM radio station now, uh, man, it's time to take the pension. you know, because if you're any good at all and you've been on the air for any number of years, you should be able to get an FM station at least. And even they are dying now. Look at Sirius FM. Sirius FM, Sirius XM, not FM, Sirius XM satellite radio. New York City, Howard Stern, $4 billion gross a year. $4 billion a year coming in. You would think, they could stay afloat with revenue like that coming in, but they're not. They went like bankrupt twice in the last 10 years, declaring. And I'm thinking they know this. They figure this cow has been milked and it's old because, radio anymore nowadays, with kids having the internet, why the hell do they need an FM radio station to listen to or a satellite station? Nobody's got satellite radio in their house. You might have it in your car, and that's nice, but you got to pay for it. $10 a month, which isn't too bad, but it's $120 a year to occasionally in your car listen to a satellite station and your favorite music. So, Sirius XM, the executives aren't idiots there. Everybody's paying everybody as much as possible. I mean, I won't even go into Howard Stern. I think he's officially retired there. They just play like his reruns. But when he was there for 10 or 20 years or so at Sirius XM radio, he got an unbelievable amount of money that it's no wonder XM went bankrupt. Floating salaries like that. I mean, geez, I don't know what I would have done for getting a salary like that. Well, I'll tell you what. I'd take that salary for a couple of years and retire and go buy a yacht and a nice house in Florida or Hawaii or California, and I'd get the hell out of New York. So, um, you know, the writing's on the wall because remember when the caveman used to just stretch skin across a rock or something or a hollowed out log and beat on it with a stick? Well, that's kind of what radio is nowadays. Even television. I mean, with the internet, you realize any radio station, any television station around the world, you can get on your computer or on your smartphone one way or another. Anybody who's a media type thing nowadays also simulcasts to the internet if they're smart. And so there's a war on right now in media, and it's for eyeballs and ears. War to see who's going to win. And I'll tell you what, who's in the lead right now and who has the favored future. I'm uploading this, and my show, Dirty Little Secrets, just premiered, just started on Spotify. Spotify also is the podcast hosting. Well, I won't say studio. Joe Rogan has his own studios in Texas, at his home in Texas. I mean, when you're making 55, when you're making $50 million a year, 50 million for doing podcasts, well, video podcasts on Spotify, you can build your own studio in your own house, and you'd be surprised how cheap his equipment is. I mean, you think, God, he must have like $1 million studio and a whole army of techs and guys walking around, just state of the art everything. And you would be so wrong. As a matter of fact, the mixer I bought that I'm going to start using for my own Spotify video video podcast, is exactly the same mixer that Joe Rogan used in his studio in Texas, making 50 million a year, and the mixer cost about $250. 250 is what our mixers cost, and they do everything we need. You know, they take. Well, I won't get into technicals because most people won't know what I'm talking about. But they also have things like reverb and chorus and echo and equalization. You can boost the bass and the mid range and the treble, and it's a giant toy. But the next time I do a broadcast, if I'm using that mixer, uh, I can do a lot of great things with my voice that radio stations back in the 60s, 1960s, used to do in New York City. And they thought it was groundbreaking, and it was, because they used echo, reverb, and delay units on their jocks when they were on the air, and it gave it a bigger, fuller, richer sound. And they also used equalization. They pumped up the bass so their voices resonated, and there was this delay and echo and chorus in their speaking. Well, you know what? Now I got exactly the same thing. You know, uh, 60 years later, after the day of Dan Ingram and Cousin Brucey and Chuck Leonard and Harry Harrison and Ron Lundy and all those guys, uh, now, because of computers and chip technical advances, you don't need a room full of crap to do that. Back then, If you had, let's see, now an eventide harmonizer. I'm not sure exactly what it did. It's one of those things. I don't think it was just. I don't think it was equalization. I think it was effects. You could raise pitches of voices or lower them and things like that. One of those cost like $3,000 back then in those days. An eventide harmonizer, and now you buy a $250 mixer, and all that's already built in to your mixer, which is awesome. You know, so anybody who knows a little bit about radio and broadcasting, or a studio, or has ever worked in one, and has a couple of scratch dollars saved up, you can start your own podcast from your home. You know, you could be the next Joe Rogan. But well, he had a head start. The guy was on, what was it, network, or news radio. Yeah, that show. That was great. Dave Foley, star of that, and Joe Rogan, of course, played the engineer for the station, and he was always building these gizmos and kits. Like he built one time, he built Bill a stun gun, you know, out of a garage door opener, and a couple of batteries and some capacitors and stuff. And so Joe was on TV, and he had connections, and so he had money to start his own thing, and was known. And not knocking the guy, okay, but to listen to Joe Rogan, unless he's doing like Donald Trump or one of the Beatles or something like that, a big movie star or somebody big in music. He does a lot of sports stuff. He's really a sports fanatic, and he's got his slot of people, and that generates $50 million a year because of the number of listeners and the eyeballs and ears that come to his slot and showtime. And he's not even exclusive to Spotify. He can be on YouTube and Rumble and all these other uh, outlets on the internet. And I actually think now, if you're going to a radio station for a job, you're really not thinking it through, because you go to a radio station, they've got overhead and salaries and advertising and all that. And if you're on Spotify and you attract listeners because they like what you're doing and people find you interesting, wow, you don't need any of that. You don't need a building besides your own house. So is that what you're trying to do there, Captain Jack? No, no, I don't have any illusions that I'm going to be another Joe Rogan, because man, he had a big head start on me. When was news radio on? That was talking 25, 30 years ago. So, he's been in Hollywood, and in the meantime, I've been rolling around doing different things, which I'll get into. But suffice it to say, um, where was I here on the script that I wrote? Don't worry about it. We let's see, what page are we on now? We're on page 3. Page 3. You don't want to know how many pages, and it's all single spaced. I tend to do that. I'll roll off of the subject and get just going in an area because, you know, you've lived as long as I have. You got stories, and you've met people and seen things and done stuff. And I make no apologies for that. As a matter of fact, radio stations are idiots for wanting to hire 20 somethings because they got nothing to say. They have no life experience. You have to live a little to be able to look back at it and give some tips and heads up to other people. See, I'm off script again. I don't know how long this thing is going to be. I hope it's not so big I can't upload it. But all right. The only things I hated, like I said, abusing equipment and not showing up for your airtime. And the standards I set back then, I think, influenced future generations because they'd arrange their annual beginning of the year meetings kind of like that, and they'd tell them what's up and give them a little head start on how to do a good show. The first thing they ever told me at my college radio station before going on the AM air for the first time I've ever was a DJ on the air anywhere, they said, "You're saying W. Don't say W. It's not W. It's W. W. But you got to do it fast. You can't say double U. You have to say W. I mean, W. W 77 WABC, New York. Chime time right now, Ron Lundy, Dan Ingram, 6:13. What is this? Wednesday night, June 4th? Yeah, Wednesday night, June 4th. You're listening live. Actually, you're not. I'm not simulcasting because I'm on a backup computer. For all the stuff I've got sitting around, my main computer power supply choked because I tend to do that to electronic equipment. Uh, I've been known to open up about 10 tabs at once on a browser, or even have two. I'll have Chrome and Firefox going, and for different things, and I'll just burn the hell out of the capacitors and the power supplies because they run 24/7. Basically, this computer has been up and running for 10 years, you know, and it did crash a month ago at a very bad time. It Windows lost it, and I couldn't recover it, and I had to go buy a Windows disk, and because it was preloaded on the machine, and I didn't have it backed up. They always tell you back it up, back it up, back it up. Yeah, eventually I'll. But when you wanted to back up a 300 gigabyte hard drive, uh, a few years ago, you were talking the most you could stuff on something was 5 gigs at a time on a DVD. So 5 gigs, and you got to load 300. So you need 60 of those. And let's see, I guess that would have cost about, I'm thinking about 30 or 40 bucks worth of DVDs just to back up your hard drive. But now, you pop on Amazon, they bring you a flash drive that holds 300 gigabytes. You can back up your entire hard drive, no problem. Which, of course, I hadn't. And, it comes with staying up with technology. Uh, a flash drive like I'm talking about cost about, geez, what did it cost me? Well, the little ones, the 8 gigabyte flash drives are about $2 a piece or something like that. So do the math. I think I paid like $12 for the big flash drive, and so that's a lot of it. Why people don't back stuff up, but now you've got no excuse because flash drives are so cheap. USB, and you just pop it in, and you do a mirror image or whatever. Make sure you get the everything in there that is needed to boot, the boot sector of the. So anyway, yeah, I know I'm losing all the women because nobody wants to hear all this technical junk. So let's get back on track here a little bit. Try to salvage this. Um, you can't be very creative. What I wanted to say is you can't be very creative if you're under a lot of rules and pressure. the radio station program director and the station manager are telling you, don't deviate from this clock or you're fired, you're gone. And also pressure to perform. You've got pressure to keep your ratings up and have listeners, and you got pressure because they have these outside consultants, these wannabe DJs that sell their services to radio stations to come in to your radio station and record all the jocks on their airtime, and they'll listen to their shift, and then they'll tell them why they suck and why they're where they're falling down. I know we had a consultant come to one of my stations, and he they don't talk to you. They don't tell the jocks anything. They tell the program directors and the station managers, and then they can choose to tell them what they told them. And what he said about me was, it sounds like he's just along from the ride for the ride. He's coasting. Well, of course I was along for the ride. I was scared to death. I was, 30 years old, and I was doing what I always wanted to do when I was a kid, be on the air and DJ, and I didn't want to lose the job. And from the way they talked, if I started to improvise and start, doing bits and gags and stuff, I'd be gone. And they never said, we want you to have a personality. It really would be nice if we had something going for us besides the music and the machine man that is doing something that you could train birds to do if they're parrots. That was the Beatles, and that was the Beatles. She Loves You. Remember, that was a big hit in the 60s, in the 64 area. Remember them on Ed Sullivan? Yeah. Anyway, so you've got that flaming edge that you got to play on. Nobody could do it better than Howard Stern. He went over the line, but he didn't get fired because they couldn't fire him because he was making the radio station so much damn money. And but so you got to forget about the rules and the pressure, because you got to be given your freedom if you're going to get your wings and fly and find your own niche and do something that somebody's going to pay you decent money for. And most of the guys were pretty good at their thing at the college radio station, whatever it was, classical, rock, progressive, popular hit, pop hit radio. That was my thing. Okay, now my script thing is stuck. I need a girl here, sitting here, just pulling the pages by and following what I'm saying. Are you on the script at all? I mean, you've been talking for half an hour and I don't see the words here. Oh my God, is it before or after this? So yeah, that's the way it is. If I didn't do this, if I didn't write something down on paper and put it up there, I'd be sitting here silent, sitting before you, trying to remember what the hell I wanted to talk about. But when I write it all down, there's no pressure. I just go off, straight off the rails onto different subjects, and I can't do this without the script written, and I don't use the script. So what's up with that? And that's just the way it is. If I didn't put anything up there, I'd be scared to death. Wouldn't have anything to talk about. And everybody's saying, "Hey, you still don't, Dave. You're still not talking about anything. Say something sportsy. How about that Super Bowl, huh? Boy, look at those Eagles." So anyway, I was going to tell you, at going back to college radio again. Believe me, that could be one of the most fun things you do at college. Well, you know what I mean. Besides the dating and going out and the girls and the fraternity parties, those are fun. But we had a lot of fun at WMUH AM FM stereo, a whole 300 watts of power. blasting out across the whole campus. Well, actually, we hit all of Allentown strong, which is a decent sized little city. And my best friend at the college was a guy named Darrell Plater, Darrell Aaron Plater. In my classes, he was a math major. I was political science. Well, truth be told, I was political science, but I spent more time at the radio station than I did in political science classes and doing homework and reading for political. Oh my God, you want to go into a boring major? Oh, and the reading load. I did not want to become a lawyer. That was other people's ideas for my life. You're 16 years old and you're in high school and you're going to college. Why? Because your father went to college and you want a good job and your brothers are in college right now. And I said, yeah, well, Bob wants to be a doctor and John, he doesn't know what the hell he wants to do. He never did. I mean, he came out of college and the draft was still on for the Vietnam War. So he volunteered to go into the Navy. And after he did his 4 years or so in the Navy, then uh, they hired him as a stockbroker. Well, what the heck? The guy knows how to fly jets. He must know how to sell stock to people who want to invest. So he was working at, I think it was Merrill Lynch or something like that in Allentown. And he was there a year and they canned him because he was terrible with people, was selling them stuff. So, he was married. Unfortunately, his wife married him when he was in the Navy, so she had no idea what he'd be like out in the real world. She's just, oh, he's an airline pilot. I mean, he's a pilot. Look, he's flying these big jets and everything. And 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 you know what? When you get out of the Navy, and that's what you know how to do, if the airlines ain't hiring you, you're screwed. And during the Vietnam War, they had what 50,000 guys over in Nam, and how many of them were on carriers and flying jets? I mean, the Navy was pumping out ex-pilots looking for airline jobs. So the airlines weren't hiring because they were stuffed. I mean, what? You don't like black coffee? Well, the current captain on this flight likes black coffee, and you're his co-pilot, so you're fired. We don't need you. Go sell stocks. Go build houses. Go. Oh, I don't know. And after he uh, after he had his stockbroker job, he tried real estate, and then he went to Florida, back to his wife's home area with. Oh man, her father was a hoot. He was cool. He was the coolest guy in the entire family. My entire family. His name was Joe Cooper, and he lived in Green Cove Springs, which is a little town about 15 miles south of Jacksonville. And he was the mayor of Green Cove Springs. All 600 people or whatever it was there. And so John went down there, and I think the way it was uh, Linda was teaching math, like calculus, in high school, and they had money saved up, went to a bank with a down payment, and had enough money to build their first house. And and well, he was a Navy, he was a vet. He came out, and where regular people have to pay a sizable down payment for a house, you're starting a business and you were in the Navy. Oh yeah, $5 on you? Good. Okay, we'll put up the rest. You were in the Navy, so and they financed buying all the materials and hired contractors to build their first house that they sold for a profit, and so on and so forth down the line. And I won't get into that too deeply. Too late, Dave. Yeah. Could you imagine if I had to play music on this? If I had a license from ASCAP or BMI to do a music show. I mean, when would I fit it in? So all I know is I got a lot to talk about, and eventually I'm going to roll on something that's going to hit, and people are going to like it. It's like when anybody starts out. Howard Stern talks about his beginning and what he was like at his first little stations. You're scared to death. You want to keep your job. You don't know what you're doing. You're nervous that to try anything because you don't want to get fired, or you don't. God forbid you say a nasty word. I mean, I can swear up a storm on this because this is the internet. And if you don't want to hear me dropping f bombs, you can just go over to the next jock or the next podcaster, or go over to YouTube and listen to the girl talking about her little kittens and how her little brother put a big brown stain in his underpants that day at school. Whatever flips your switch. But so where was I? Okay, page 3. It's going to be midnight, fans. We're going to be doing this till midnight. I wonder how many. See, I'm recording this because this little computer can't handle streaming and recording, and I want to back my shows up with flash drives too. So it's a lot to ask an old computer to do. Well, Dave, why don't you get off your ass and put the new power supply in the old computer there that was running when you blew it up? Well, that's a very good question, because see, that computer is 4 times the amount of RAM. That computer is 4 times the speed for processing and 4 core CPUs. That computer has, so besides it having all the RAM and the speed and everything, it's 64-bit. And if you know what that is, this computer uses 32-bit Windows programs because, I don't know, I guess the old computers would joke if they had to do 64-bit processing. But, the other computer I have here does all that. And I know I should upgrade. Remember when Microsoft was pushing everybody from Windows 7 to like Windows 10, and everybody was wondering what's up, why the hell are they giving it away? Is it that bad? Or, are they just trying to sell Intel more chips? Because every time they do one of these increase in RAMs and speed and all that, you got to throw away the computer, you guys. Not just Windows. You got to say goodbye to having a computer that you were working on and that you have all set up just exactly the way you want it. And you're going to get another hard drive because when I started, my first computer was a Packard Bell in 1995. You realize that's 30 years ago? 30 years ago, I bought my first computer at Walmart, and I gypped them down. They had these long of tooth computers that had been sitting around. And I said, man, I'd be embarrassed if I was you guys to be showing these old computers. These are a year behind. I'd dump them and get them the hell out of here. And the next day they put them on sale. The manager listened to me, and I came in and bought one. And that's how I got my Packard Bell for like half price. And he was pissed. He was mad. He said, this guy set me up. He criticized my computers, and then he just wanted to buy one cheap. Hey, there's one born every minute. You're either a shark or you're the chum in the water. So, hey, if you can't run with the big dogs, stay on the porch. So, I was telling you about my best friend at my college radio station. And we're talking back when I was 19, 20 years old. And most fun I had in my life. Had nothing to do with classes or books or. And Muhlenberg College in Allentown was a tough school. I imagine it still is. It's not tough because they just shovel work onto you. They give you a big load. You take one course over at Muhlenberg back when I was there, like international politics. One course about the way governments interact around the world and how we keep each other from blowing each other up and things like that. And they'll give you a stack of paperbacks. I mean, let's see if I. Oh, well, the camera's there. See, but my monitor's here. But they'll give you a stack of paperbacks, about 7 or 8 of them for one semester, and that's one course. You know, that's not all the ridiculous core crap you got to take in college, like English, and you already had 3 years of German in high school that you're never going to use on the planet anywhere. If you find a German tourist in a supermarket in America as you're shopping for your groceries, the only thing you're going to be able to say is "Ich liebe dich" or Latin. Latin's another one. Amo masamat, mama samadas, amant. And you lucky people who didn't have to take Latin, how lucky you were. Boy, what a stupid idea that was. This is how we're going to occupy 1/8 of their day in eighth grade junior high school. They're going to learn a dead language that they're never going to use. But it's good discipline. Uh, you know, so is jogging a mile every day. But anyway, enough of the insanity of our educational system. See, I knew I was going to do this. Just phew, off the. Okay, let me tell you about this guy because he deserves a serious moment. We had a lot of fun. Best friend at college. Hysterically funny. Just naturally a comedian. Big on sports. Knew every stat. All the baseball, football players. I wasn't that into sports, but he was. As a matter of fact, he would smell like a used jockstrap most of the time because he's either coming in from playing basketball. That's what you do when you go to college. You play basketball. Not for the college. I mean, just a bunch of guys with a pickup game outside after classes. And he was into sports. He loved comedy, and he was a fan of the Marx Brothers. So you can guess he could do the faces that Harpo Marx would do. And for those of you who don't know, oh, you missed out. Those were some funny guys. They didn't even need sound, but uh, Groucho Marx, the head Marx brother, the leader of them, uh, his wit, he could sting somebody so badly with a line, and there's nobody who's been anything like Groucho Marx since. I mean, who's the guy who used to run around insulting everybody? Um, Geez, tip of my tongue. He was in Vegas. He hung out with, the Rat Pack, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and those guys. Maybe I'll think of it later. But, he was kind of maybe like Harpo Marx or Groucho Marx. But Groucho, he never screamed any of his lines at people. Okay, so one of his favorite gags to pull on me was, when I had my air slot, you do news breaks, or you were required to do I think we had the CBS News at the top of the hour, something like that. And then directly after CBS News, we'd have pulled stuff off the telegraphs, teletypes, and we're reading stories. And, sometimes we were lucky enough to have students who were training who were going to be news writers, and they'd take these rough stories right off the wires and they'd rewrite them. And the dirty trick that you can play on a jock who's on the air doesn't get a chance to pre-read the stories was okay. He would write the news break, and but in the middle of the story, you'd be in a serious national story about the president, and about halfway through it, he would break into a nursery rhyme. That would be right in front of your eyes, typed up as part of the story. You know, Mary had a little lamb, you know, and you'd be going off like this, and you had two choices, and he would break right back into the serious news story halfway through it. So you know, you didn't have an ending if you didn't read through the. You couldn't just quit because the other half of the story, people want to know. You know what happened after Nixon got shot. You know, well, then what? Did he die or is he okay? But uh, so he'd put the nursery rhymes right in the middle of a hot story, and and I would have two choices. There's only two ways you can go. So if I was not breaking up in laughter, and you know, I'd be reading this serious story about something bad happening, and you know, somebody's getting impeached or investigated, and I'd be just laughing my ass off, and I'd just be losing it. And no doubt, people listening, well, what the hell is wrong with him? He's in the middle of this serious story, or you know, the death of somebody. You know, the Queen's attended somebody's funeral that was, you know, the Prime Minister of England or something like that, and then here comes Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack. And I would just it would break me up, and so I tried it both ways, and neither way works. But so if I could control myself and stop from laughing, I would actually have director, the news director would just shut down the mic and just pull the plug on the air and wait until I was composed and stopped laughing. I mean, I was laughing so hard, I had tears coming out of my eyes, and my gut hurt, my stomach hurt, and everybody said, "What happened?" He was reading the story, and then they went off the air. What the hell happened? Or they'd hear me laughing. He goes, "What is wrong with him? This guy is reading this deadly serious. You know, war breaks out. You know, nuclear fallout is. They're worried about them pushing the button over there, and I don't know who used to be always fighting with each other. India, Pakistan, all that." And I'd start breaking out in just uncontrollable laughter. And this guy needs serious help. And so, in the middle of the story, without warning, and like I said, you had two choices. If you weren't breaking up in laughter, you could try to read what he wrote so the audience got it. You know, read it just as he typed it up there, joke and all, or and then they would be in on it, know what's going on. Or, you know, I was worried about not sounding professional. You know, I was worried, geez, I can't read a nursery rhyme. What the hell is wrong with him? Doesn't he read his stories before he goes on the air? No, there's not that kind of time in radio. You just have people walking in with sheets of paper and slapping them on your desk. Then, here you go. Okay, okay, and remember, at the end of this news break, at the end of this commercial break, we're going to be going right into the news, and so I would read what he wrote so the audience could get it, or skip ahead and read the end of the story. Try to go seamlessly through a serious story and try not to laugh my head off while I'm doing it because I'm thinking about what I skipped over. My God, it was the last year in office, I think, for Richard Nixon, and I won't go into the story he was covering here for different reasons. But Daryl, Daryl Plater, my best friend from Muhlenberg College Radio, way back when. This show is dedicated to you. Season 1, Episode 1. Well, you know, actually, I did a couple of dirty little secrets over on YouTube. I was on YouTube and put them up over there at my old site where I did an entirely different thing on the air. And I won't get into that because I have too much respect for certain things. So, so yeah. And when I was going through this and writing this up, and I thought, gee, uh, that was the number one radio station in the United States for college radio as far as how it was ranked by like the contemporary magazines. I don't know why. As far as I was concerned, we were just a bunch of idiots having a good time and goofing off. And we did no stuff too. Like there were guys who would go to the fraternity parties on the weekends, you know, which would end like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they'd be just plastered. They could barely walk, and they'd stumble down to the radio station and do a show, which is hilarious. If you've ever listened to a college student who is a disc jockey on air, who's plastered, and he just walked in at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night, well, Saturday morning, from being at a party, and he's doing a show on the air, drunk, which is highly illegal, for airwaves in this country back then. So, but nobody's listening to a 300 watt radio station in Allentown at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, or nor did they give a crap. And if they did, so sorry for that guy in his life. But yeah, when I think about the radio station, I think about Daryl, and I think about. Did I already tell you about? Yeah, I told you about David Frick, Rolling Stone magazine senior editor, who I worked with there, and so wow, we had some stuff going on there, and we were so hot as a radio station in Allentown. If you don't know the area, it's in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, but it's not in the north. It's not in the south. It's geez, I guess it's about 50 to 100 miles north of Philadelphia, and Allentown. Geez, I forgot where I was going with that. That'll happen. Hey, I have ADHD, people. I can get lost between getting up from my chair here in the living room and going to the kitchen just to grab an ibuprofen. And, I'll see something going on. By the way, I kind of run a cat shelter here, a hospice for older, abandoned, or sick cats. And I love the guys. And, I had a person who loves cats tell me about one of her male cats. She said, I just can't put up with him anymore. I mean, he's a bully, and there's always getting into fights with the other cats, and I got to get rid of him. And I said, let me take him and see what I can do with him. And the little band of rebels I have over here, they were all out of one litter, and he's the best behaved cat I've got, and I love him. He's so these little wiry kitten cats. They're barely, well, they're beyond kitten stage now, but they haven't put on much weight. And he's about 20-25 pounds, and they'll come up to him and just swat the hell out of him and be going at him, and he'll just keep walking. It's like, I don't know. Hey, I could take them apart like a $3 watch, but why bother? So, anyways, how did we get into that? Why was I? Okay, so this is why I have notes, or fully scripted out pages in front of me, so I can get back on some kind of a track. Okay. Oh God, what a time to be saying this. Okay, 1 year. We dedicated this show to Daryl Aaron Plater, rest in peace, 1 year after he graduated with a math degree from Muhlenberg College in Allentown. Not a shoddy operation of a college. 1 year. He took his own life in the garage of his father's house, his family's home up in Connecticut. I think it was it Woodbury or something like that? Woodbury, Connecticut. And because things were not going well for him. And this is 1 year out of college, good college, math major. He could have taught calculus in high school, but there just weren't any openings that year that he graduated. And so he was working in his hometown, and it was a beautiful little hometown. The way the Poconos used to be before everybody started cutting down all the trees, because the New Yorkers moving in, they think a forest is, having a fern plant inside your living room. So, 1 year after he graduated from a good college with a good degree, he took his own life because, well, socially, job wise, family wise. And might know somebody in this situation. For God's sakes, man, if you just graduated from college, give it more than a year. You're going to get a good job that you enjoy doing something somewhere. You're not going to be stuck in a little cottage mom and pop store selling cheese. But it was such a cool looking town, and it was so, Thomas Kincaid-ish. He should have just enjoyed his surroundings where he was. But, it was more than that. He was afflicted with a fairly bad case of acne. So he had a lot of bad cards. I still remember how he used to joke around and kid and punk us with stunts in the station. Talking about a radio station just made me think of Daryl. And the girl he liked in Connecticut, right out of college, he saw this girl for a year. I mean, didn't see her to date her, just he knew her and worked around her. And the girl he liked would not give him the time of day. He worked in a cheese shop, and he and his father didn't get along. 1 year, he bought a used piano with money that he earned himself. And he came home that Thanksgiving. And when he came home from school, from college, his father had chopped up the piano and chopped it up into firewood, and it was behind the house. And his dad was a TWA airline pilot. Go figure. How can a dad do that to a kid? How can a father do that to, a son is pursuing a passion that he's interested in, and he earns his own money to buy something, and the family chucks it out. Well, I got my own story to tell you about that kind of stuff later. So Daryl and I used to sit up nights in the dorm, Martin Luther Hall dorm. I don't even know if it's there anymore. They probably ripped it down and put up another one. And we would talk the whole night through about everything, including rating every girl on campus. Well, I think we had 1,600 students on the campus. So, figure, I don't know how many. I don't know if we had 400 girls in the freshman class because, well, there was an attrition rate at Muhlenberg. A lot of people would transfer. So it wasn't like the classes were divided up equally. But but we'd rate every girl that we knew on campus. But hey, it was Muhlenberg College. These were mostly well-to-do, socially repressed white girls. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember seeing black people or black students at Muhlenberg College campus back then. And to be fair, we're talking 50 years ago. And I don't remember anything, but there was a few Asians, I guess. We might have had some Hispanics. There might have been one or two Chinese or Japanese people, but it was mostly Muhlenberg College was a Lutheran college. Lutheran started and backed. I think Peter Muhlenberg, started it. And so Lutherans are mostly German people. They came from the old homeland, and they were German. So so to be fair, it was Muhlenberg College. And have you ever seen German girls and women? Socially repressed white girls whose parents didn't care if the daughter put 50 pounds on or so, because she ain't going to no beauty pageants. And know what I mean? Kind of that Northeastern college average white girl vibe going on. So without further ado, or Mountain Dew, here's a little thing I wrote a couple years ago. Oh yeah, the last 2 hours, this was all just introduction and me kiting it. Something I wrote a couple years ago, but I pulled it off the computer, and it has meaning and relevance, and I thought it was interesting. So just pretend that I am two different people. I know, right? Okay. Um, and remember the Oh God movies? You ever see John Denver with George Burns? George Burns is God. John Denver is this little doe-eyed young guy, who God appears to and gives him little tasks and things to do. And he's like, oh, why me? What's going on? And so just pretend that as I read this, I'm two different people. I know. By the way, it has nothing to do with my college friend, my friend from college. That was just totally different subject. So if you like the Oh God movies and you thought they were cute and sort of sweet and they had some truths in them that relate to Christianity today, you'll love this. Okay. But if this doesn't work out, I'm going to try to do this. But I'm having an awful time with my voice. I don't know what's wrong. If I'm getting a sore throat or a cold or whatever. But it's ragged. You ever get that ragged throat? And so I wanted to try to do two different voices. Now with the mixer that I just got, the mixer that's sitting in the other room, I pulled it out of the package. I inspected it, looked at it, all the parts are there. I roughly looked over the instructions. And geez, after working at 6 radio stations and 2 nightclubs, you'd think you know how to run a mixer, but they're always changing stuff. I mean, there's different models and features, and they're all different. It doesn't matter if you have a $10,000 mixer or a $100 mixer. None of them are relatable to each other. It's just the way it is. So and the instructions are cryptic. They don't tell you. They just point at knobs. It's a German company. I have a German mixer, and it's a German company, and they just have little lines going to buttons on the mixer, and then it says what it is. But it doesn't say don't push this button and then push that button or you'll blow it up. You'll lose your mixer. I mean, I don't think I really can do that with the mixer. But you got to be careful about things like turning on and off a mixer if the main amps are already on. I have professional sound equipment amplifiers that can make my walls and my neighbors next 2 houses up make their walls shake. But I never unleashed it because, I don't want somebody to get offended. But if this doesn't work, if my voice isn't holding up or it just doesn't sound like it's working out to me to try to do two people. What I was going to say is the new mixer I'm getting, I can do this. I can do the voice of God and I can do the voice of another person, and you'll never know it's me because the effects that are on the unit, I can load the one voice, I can turn the equalization so the bass is up and put a little reverb and echo on it so that it's drawn out in the voice and everything. And the other voice I can just run clean without any effects on it or put something else on it that would make it sound different. So it would be a lot easier with that mixer running this bit, because you can really do a good God if you can set up good reverberation and echo, because that's what his voice does sound like. It's just coming from everywhere, and you just. But that's another story. Uh, okay, I'll set it up, and I'll stop if this doesn't sound like it's gonna work, and I'll just pack it in for the day, and I'll say right up front here, hey, thanks for sticking around and just checking it out and seeing what uh, Jack Lantern's little new show is, Dirty Little Secrets. Oh yeah, and I should have kind of build up what's coming and what I'm doing here. And Dirty Little Secrets. First of all, Jack Lantern is not my real name. Oh, and there's two rules in law, and when it talks about when you're talking about other people, uh, it's like this. If you're telling something that other people might not want to be told on, you can tell the story, but you can't tell them who they were. You can't name the people, but you can tell and say somebody did this and this, and yeah, you know. But or you can name people and you can say they did something, but not go into specifics and not tell anybody what the event was. But if you tell people the exact details and it's a private thing, or it'll make them look bad, and you tell people their names, you can find yourself with a huge lawsuit, depending on how rich you are and how angry the other people are. So, that's the way we're going to play it. And hence Dirty Little Secrets. By the way, my full radio name here is Jack Orion Lantern. Get it? Jack O Lantern, Jack O Lantern. And back in ye old England, back in the days before electricity, at night they had gas lampposts for people to see at night when they're walking around outside. And the guy who would keep these lamps lit and these gas lights going in the streets of England was called a jack-o'-lantern. Oh! You mean it wasn't just because of the pumpkins that were funny looking that people put on porches? No, no. Jack-o'-lantern in England, it was an abbreviation, really, of Jack of the Lantern. Jack of the Lantern. Jack, and a Jack in England meant an everyday guy, just like John. The name John is here today. Like, he was a John, prostitute talking about paying customers. He was a John. Same thing in England. Jack was a common name. And, he's a Jack. And the guy lighting the gas lamps on the street at night, Jack of the Lantern. And that's your average John Doe guy who takes care of the lights. Jack of the Lantern, Jack o' Lantern. Because we English people, we get lazy about pronouncing all the little article words. So eventually it just becomes Jack o' Lantern. But if your middle name is Orion, your first name is Jack, and your last name is Lantern, your name is Jack o' Lantern, which I thought was pretty clever, And Orion is Orion the Hunter, which is a constellation in the sky in the zodiacs, and which has nothing to do with anything. But I just thought, isn't it cool to have a name like Jack o' Lantern? If I had a kid, I think I'd name him Jack Orion, so at least it can be Jack O. Jack O. What's your son's name? Jack O. Jack Orion. Oh, cool, man, a Star Trek name. And we had enough Georges, Bills, and Bobs and Sues and Bettys in the last couple generations. But I wanted to tell you about Dirty Little Secrets. We're using a nom de plume. Some of you may know me or may guess who I am or be able, to figure out who I am. But I'm disguised cleverly. See, I've got some gristle growth, mustache, and funny glasses, and an FBI hat. FBI hat, or people have stopped me on the street and say, "Are you an FBI agent?" And I'd say, "What's an FBI agent?" He said, "Well, the hat in your head. What does that stand for?" It's uh, full-blooded Italian, or female body inspector is the other one you always hear. Oh, okay, ha ha. You know, but did you know in this country, actually, if somebody stops you in the street and says, "Are you an FBI agent?" and you say yes, that's against the law. You cannot, you can't imitate a policeman. You can't tell people you're a policeman and not be a policeman. Well, you can't do that with the FBI either. So when somebody stops me on the street, and they do, and say, were you in the FBI?" And I'd say immediately, "No, it's a little hat store in the mall, $4. FBI, get all the FBI hats you want. Novelty store." But see, the real FBI hats, I'll let you in on a little secret here. So next time you go down the street, if you see one of these, you'll know you're looking at a real, honest to God FBI agent. Okay, it's illegal for you to buy a real FBI hat if you're not FBI. And the places that sell the FBI gear, the jackets and the hats, you have to write to them to order your clothing, the hats and the jackets, on FBI stationery from an FBI office. You can't even go home as a real FBI agent and order FBI clothing from your house. It has to be on FBI agency computers, and you have to use stationery that's FBI and all that kind of stuff. And once you resign or you're out of the FBI, you can't wear those official hats anymore. But the only time they use that clothing, it's so they don't shoot each other when they go on raids. When they go into a drug raid or something and it's dark in there and people are moving quick and guns come out and shots get fired or something, the reason why they wear the big bright blue jackets and the big gold yellow letters on them is so they don't shoot each other. So when the agents go in there, they know who the good guys are. And that's true. And so the official jackets and hats are royal blue jackets with like a gold or a banana yellow lettering on the back and on the hat. And if you see that, if you see the gold or the yellow and the blue, he's the real deal. And my guidance counselor in high school tried to talk me out of being a disc jockey or on-air personality, and damn, he put so much doubt in my mind. He did screw me up for decades. But you know, he told me, he said, "You ought to be a lawyer. They make a lot of money. Interesting work." I said, "Well, that's good for you. I'm glad if you would like to be a lawyer. Go to law school. You probably went to college. You're a teacher. you know, you're a guidance counselor. You teach guidance poorly, but he did." And his name was Robert Reichard. Bless his heart. He was in my dad's church. My father is a Lutheran minister. So anyways, but this guy told me that I ought to be a lawyer because, well, my IQ's high enough. He figured you're smart. You can do college. Yeah, if I wanted to, if I had the least little bit of interest, which I did not, but if you're a German Lutheran son of, a German Lutheran family, your family tells you you're going to college, you're going to college. If they have to fill out the application, pay the entrance fee, and fill out the, scholarship papers, and tell you to get in the car on the first day. Get in the car. Your mother has packed your suitcases and everything, and dump you off at the freshman dorm, which is basically what they did with me because your father went to Muhlenberg, your brothers went to Muhlenberg, you're going to Muhlenberg. I don't want to go to Muhlenberg. Well, it's cheap. See, your dad's a Lutheran minister, and you can get half off right there because you're a minister's son, and it's a Lutheran college. And also, you were good enough in school that you can easily get scholarships to pay for all the rest of the cost of going. And, or your father will get you a job at the cement mills in town where they pay very well for summer labor help, in which you work in the worst possible conditions of temperatures and sweat. And God, you do not want to work summers at a cement mill. Well, now it's all outdoors and it's modern machinery and computers and everything. But anyway, so that was my dream childhood. And, they put me into this Lutheran college. And, well, my best friend from college killed himself because, he wanted to play the piano. He went out, earned his own money, bought a piano. His father chopped it up, put it out behind the house for Thanksgiving. And that's just the way German home. I didn't even know. I mean, I heard all about the Bill of Rights and America's Constitution, and they are always teaching us about freedom. But I didn't think that as a son or daughter living in a home for parents, adult parents with adult parents, that you had the freedom to do what you want to do. I didn't know till a couple decades ago that you don't have to do what your parents tell you to do till you're 22 or 25 years old. Once you're 18, once you're 16, you can decide what you want to do and steer your own course for your future. Get out of here, really. And they start just glazing over your mind in 7th grade. 13 years old. There you are studying dead languages. Biology 1, Latin 1, Algebra 1, English. It worried me that we live in a country that even people who were born and raised in the United States had to have English classes every year until they went to college, and then they gave them more English classes. Most classes today, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, I'm sure when you get in there as a freshman, they send you to English class. Hey, you know what? I had this down when I was 10. I was talking a pretty good streak then. But no, every year, they just keep pushing the boundaries out. But this year, as a senior, you're going to read poetry. And we're going to study Shakespeare. Oh, joy! We're going to read something written in almost a whole different language, 400 years old, about stuff that's way less interesting than what's on television tonight. Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Hamlet, Merchant of Venice. It's embarrassing how much Shakespeare they shot us with when we were in school. And oh boy, and then you go to college. Those English professors just can't wait to shove some more Shakespeare on you. And if you're an English major, boy, you know what? You stood yourself in front of the gun. If you're an English major and you go to a liberal arts college, you're going to get Shakespeare. You're going to get a book of Shakespeare that's about this thick, and it has all the Shakespeare that was ever written, and you'll go through all of it. God. Anyways, let's I don't know if I'm going to do this, but I'm going to just see. Oh, I was in the point of trying to tell you what is Dirty Little Secrets all about. Where are you going with this show? Why am I spending my time listening and hoping for a point to come? Well, Dirty Little Secrets involves everything. When I was 10, 20 years ago, I had this dream of writing a book. Did you ever say to your girlfriend or wife or husband or whatever. Did you ever say, boy, if I only knew then what I know now, I'd do something different? Well, that's what Dirty Little Secrets is all about. It's, uh, if you're at the other end of life, if you're still able to change situations, you're not married yet, maybe, you haven't actually, it's rough because you gotta tell people, I'm not sure if you're under 18, if you should be listening to my show, because I can break into a pretty good Howard Stern type of conversation without even trying, flat. And that's why I gave up the other show. Because, nobody was listening. It was a scholarly thing. But who in their spare time goes to school and reads textbooks? And I was doing academic type of stuff, and it was serious. And, you know, I like George Carlin and Bill Cosby and all those guys, Bob Newhart, and the comedians, and even some of the comedians that aren't dead. you know, but actually, do we have comedians anymore? Do they still exist? I see these guys on late night at night, and I go, "Who the hell is this guy?" And they're not famous. They don't have stuff going for them. But anyhow, so dirty little secrets. Uh, it can be about anything, literally from politics or religion to social relationships, girlfriend, boyfriend, romance, marriage, sex, alcohol. And by the way, I'm a big fan of alcohol. I was raised in an alcohol-free home growing up because I was the son of a Lutheran minister, and it was a big church in a little town. And if I had a beer or a glass of wine, or sent somebody into the state store to bring out a bottle of, I don't know what, gin, or maybe amaretto, or what the hell. I don't even know what I drink anymore. Um, but I've just in my older age now, since I've become senior citizen, I've discovered the joy of mixed drinks. And like gin fizzes. I didn't even know what a gin fizz was 20 years ago. And gin fizzes are delicious. And you take seltzer water and sugar and a little lemon juice, and you put in gin, a shot of gin or two, and it's delicious. And red wine, stay away from red wine. Not big on that. Doesn't do anything. A little too watery. And let's see, what else do I have out there? Wish I could remember what I've got in my own bar right now. But I like the better beers and stuff like that. And let me tell you something. Um, Full disclosure, I did go through the training to become an ordained minister, and I guess now you know why I didn't get along with denominations because, my dad might have a glass of wine on a Sunday afternoon with dinner once a month or something like that. Is that any way to go through life? I mean, God has given us such a rich variety of ways to have grown up drinking habits. See, here's one of these you should be 18 or over areas. I don't know, maybe it's even 21. I know when you go online and you go on a site of a distiller or somebody who makes, whiskey or bourbon and stuff like that, you have to be 21 to go on there. And I don't know what's going on there or why. Is it like how many 20-year-olds are totally ignorant of beer? It's like, oh, thank goodness they stopped me from. I didn't ruin my life with alcohol because when I was 20, they stopped me at the entrance to this thing that was called Jacquin's distillery website. I don't know what was behind there, but and now that I'm 22, I know that God, thank goodness the government didn't let me on that site to look at amarettos and I don't know what does Jacquin's make. Just about everything. Oh, well, they make the gin I drink too. I'm not doing alcohol commercials, but I am saying alcohol's gotten a bad rap. See, here I am again. But this is interesting. The human race would have died out if it wouldn't have been for alcohol. Because 4,000 years ago, the Egyptians didn't know that water that had a dead pig laying in it for a month could make you sick. They didn't know about germs or disease. That's why half of Europe was wiped out by the plague in the Middle Ages, or hundreds of years ago, because they didn't know what caused sickness and disease. They'd drill holes in people's heads to let the evil spirits out and stuff like that. They didn't know that there was such a thing as germs. So, but the people who drank alcohol, like most of the German monks in Germany in the Middle Ages, had their own brewery. They would brew beer right there at their house. Men of God, Christian people, and Catholics, the priests. The priests did it too. They had vineyards and all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you why. Because somebody figured out that if I drink this stuff, for some reason, even though it's got a kick to it and this weird alcohol stuff in it, I don't die when I drink this because it purifies the water, no matter what disgusting pond scum swill it came from. So, hats off to the people who figured out how to make alcoholic drinks, because literally the Christians saved human lives by being the ones who had vineyards and wineries and brewed beer and all that, carrying on the tradition of the Egyptians. And, weren't the Egyptians horrible people? Well, now, they invented beer. And, even if you don't like anything else about an Egyptian, they invented beer. Think Amberbach and Beck's and Spaten and good beers. Not the watery crap that we brew over here in the cheap beers. But, so Martin Luther would often, a monk and the guy who started the Lutheran Church back around 1500, would have a couple beers, and he had a big day. He got up early and taught classes and translated Bibles and stuff like that. And then he'd have a couple beers at dinner, and that'd be it. He'd fall asleep on the table, head on the table, because the sedative properties of beer. So that was interesting. And there's a book out called Table Talk, which is a concise biography of Martin Luther's life. And actually, you would think, oh, how boring. A monk, a religious guy who was a priest and was thrown out of the Catholic Church because he disagreed with the Catholics. Catholics were having people pay money to the priests, and the priest told them, this will keep you out of hell, or this will keep your Uncle Jed and your Aunt Nell out of hell if you give the money towards them. So give the Catholic Church all your money and your relatives won't go to hell. And that's what they told people 500 years ago. And, people believed them. And so he had a problem with that. And also, you couldn't get married. And I would have a problem with that. And as soon as he quit the Catholic priesthood, or they threw him out, he went and grabbed one of the nuns. True story, Catherine von whatever her name was, and grabbed one of the nuns and married her. So Martin Luther had a bunch of kids, and that's how the German population started. Not quite, but I, um, it's an interesting sect, and the way Germans raise their kids, and it's military. Let me tell you, in case you're wondering, it's like like having a colonel for a father, because first of all, Germans males are taught that they're in charge. They're large and in charge. Period. They're the head of the family, and nobody questions them. Why do you want me to do this, Dad? I'll tell you. I'll give you a reason why. I'll tell you why I want you to do this, uh, or I'll give you something to cry about. Really, because up till now it's been. And well, my own dad. I guess I shouldn't tell this. Well, it's not that bad. It was common back then. He had a belt, and if he got mad enough at you, he'd put you over his knee and he'd swat you with his belt a couple times, and or spank you, and that worked until I was old enough to outrun him. And he was a little heavy. He was about 50 pounds overweight, so he was a big guy. He was scary. Yeah, big loud voice, 6 foot tall, 250 pounds or so, and as soon as he'd get that belt off, I'd run. And I was fast. For 9 years old, I could outrun a lot of adults. And I was skinny too when I was 9. And so that was the end of my discipline, you know. But nowadays, they'd throw parents like that in prison, for abusing their children. And they'd be reported by the schools as your kids have laceration marks on their butts and their behind is all red. And it's possible once in a while those Lutheran German fathers would draw blood when they were disciplining their kids and being good fathers. Spare the rod, spoil the child. That was what they dragged out of Proverbs. Boy, they rode that one home to the barn. I'll tell you, spare the rod, spoil the child. You got to use a little brutal physical punishment in order to bring a kid up properly. My brothers certainly believed in that. My brothers were evidently cared a lot about me and wanted me to be a very strong, stalwart Lutheran American citizen. So they'd beat the crap out of me every once in a while, or uh, my brother would disguise it. He'd say, "You want to go out and play catch, Dave?" And he'd take either a baseball, softball, or football, and then he'd stand about 30, 40 feet away from me and throw it as hard as he could, right at my nose, at my face. And you either learned to catch in my family, or you had a lot of bloody noses. And look at these hands. Look at these hands. I mean, it's disgusting. They're small. My hands were not made to dribble a basketball or catch a football. You know, and even with my pets, I have a couple cats, and you pick up a cat too fast with tiny hands, it's like poking them. And they go, wow! And because, can't you use something a little bigger to pick me up to spread out the weight distribution? I feel like you're trying to puncture a lung or something. So that was growing up. Jim Gaffigan never covered this area. I don't know if he had really nice parents and they were liberal and a little bit more progressive than other parents, but you never hear these kinds of stories about childhood physical abuse. Stuff that today you'd see two police cars sitting outside of your house if you did it to your children today. What did you do to your kid? I disciplined him. I swatted the hell out of him because he knocked the dish off the top shelf of the kitchen and it broke on the floor. Well, that's it. You're going to prison. Yes, sir. You abused and used your child. So, boy, things are different now. Let me tell you something. Growing up in the 60s and 70s in America, in the northeastern United States in a German home. And it's funny, don't get the wrong idea about who's Democrats and who's Republicans. Let me set you straight. They don't call it a swing state for nothing. Even between husbands and wives in German families, it's common. There'll be different registers of party. My mother, my dad was a Republican. My mother was an independent. And if you went into my grandfather's house, my father's parents, in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and if you went into their house and started talking about Republican candidates, my grandfather would start choking up food. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat till he dropped. And he was hardcore Democrat because that was the working man's party. That was the one who was behind the labor unions against the rotten bastard Republicans who owned everything and were rich and abused. And they did, they abused the workers back then. Well, God, in the 40s and 50s and 60s and stuff, before unions were strong, you'd have people dying at work. Cement mills I worked at over the summer, I had guys telling me stories how back in the 30s they had riots where the union members would be fighting against the foreman and the management of the cement mills because you had guys losing hands and falling into machinery and stuff like that and dying just as a part of earning a lousy wage, a few bucks an hour. It's not worth risking your life for. When I worked there, and they already had safety provisions in place in the 70s in the cement mill, you would walk into areas that were 350 degrees, and you had a fire suit on. They'd give you this little like raincoat, aluminum thing, and a helmet. And I was in there so long one time, you can't stay in more than about 20 minutes. And I came out, the back of my helmet was melted. And the guy said, "You stuck that in the fire." I said, "I did not. But I was wearing a sweatshirt underneath the helmet that stuck down onto the shoulders." And that's just the way things were back then. You had brutal childhoods. There was strong discipline by male parents. The father was the head of the family. They believed that the Christian way was if you spare physical discipline, you will spoil the child, and he'll never do or be anything good. And that had nothing to do with my upbringing, because I should be president of the United States now for the physical side of things. But like I say, I got older, I could run. My dad could still yell. He could scare the paint right off the walls or the wallpaper off the walls. He was a loud, big, tall guy, and people were scared of him just when he started. Some guy grabbed my dad's suit jacket one time, put a rip in his stitching, and that did it. He just flew into overdrive, and this guy, just from my dad screaming at him, this guy flew halfway across the parking lot and onto the ground, because, Germans, we started a couple world wars, no big deal, World War I and II, and I think the Chinese and the Russians are working on it now, though. I don't think we're going to get blamed for this one. Oh, and by the way, I'm not all German. There's other stuff in there. A medical doctor told me I have Asian eyes. He said, "You have Oriental eyes." I said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, I was always suspicious of my grandfather's last name because it sure sounded Japanese to me." And, he said, "Well, there you go." But we were told he was French. If you're an alien from another planet and you come to Earth and you don't want to be discovered, but you're different from regular Americans, you tell them, "We're from France." and that's the way it was like, around World War II to build up to that and everything, what with us being at war with them, if you were partially Japanese or Asian, you were not Asian. You were definitely French. French. And so, uh, let's see, where am I? So, anyways, I was telling you what dirty little secrets is about. Imagine that you're, let's say, 10 or 13 years old, and it's legal for you to be told everything I know and about life and experience and what I've learned and gathered from my own experience. Well, I was thinking of writing a book 30 years ago and calling it Stained Glass. Stained Glass. And the purpose of the book would be using my own life as a background, giving pointers so that, when people get to the age that they say, gee, if I only knew then when I was growing up what I know now, then certain problems wouldn't be there and they'd be richer or married to somebody good looking who they loved or, or something like that. And this is that book. This is that thing. And so, okay, Dave, so you're going to tell us how to live our lives if we're parents and we let our 13-year-olds listen to you. And now some shows I'm going to just tell you right up front. Listen, we're going to get into some stuff here today because I just feel like getting into some stuff here today. Don't let your kids hang out and don't blame me if they hear some bad things come in or you don't want them exposed to certain subjects and I do, like sex or alcohol or stuff like that. The stuff that my parents spent my entire childhood trying to keep me away from. and and I'm now spending this part of my life trying to get closer to those things. Oh, sex and alcohol. Yeah, good things. Good beers. But they listen. Lutheran parents knew how to teach their kids about alcohol and try to keep them out of being drunk and getting hooked on alcohol. They got it down pat. Tell you what, you want to teach your kid how to handle alcohol. Use it, enjoy it, but don't let it become your master or get you drunk or, get into trouble or, you start beating your wife or something like that. That's not a good thing, probably. Just kidding. um, but, you know, it, okay, so I know it's safe for 18-year-olds and up to listen to the show and what we're going to be broaching in subjects. But I'm trying to get people somewhere in that young age area before they get really stuck in the groove of life where it's too late. They made me go to law school. They told me I should be a lawyer. Everybody told me that. My brothers told me that. My guidance counselor, my parents told me that. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to go and be a disc jockey and sit in an air conditioned studio and listening to the Beatles and the Beach Boys and talk about it and say it's 88 degrees and 7:35. But they said, oh, disc jockeys don't make any money. Oh, and it's hard to get those jobs. and actually, okay, this is one of your first bits of golden nuggets. Let me tell you something, parents. If your kid has a passion to do something, he's going to make money at it. And he just might possibly make 100 times the money you ever made in your life. Whoa, that would be, I made 50 grand a year, so he'd have to be making 5 million a year. Hey, you know what? You know what big FM radio stations in top markets in this country are paying disc jockeys? Okay, in case you weren't up on why Sirius XM satellite radio is going bankrupt, Howard Stern, I know for a fact, made per year by contract, they paid him $100 million. Ryan Seacrest, you remember that little show, Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, and then it became Live with Kathy and whoever, after Regis died or whatever, and then it was Ryan and Kelly. Kelly and Ryan in the morning or something like that. You know what Ryan Seacrest got paid to do that little sitting there for an hour, 5 mornings a week? 20 minutes of commercials, actually 40 minutes of time, and half the time it was Kelly talking anyhow. $75 million a year to do that. And now he's just been in the industry. So he's had experience and they know him. And he does iHeartRadio, which used to be Clear Channel Radio, the network of radio stations. And he's a disc jockey. And you know what? You listen to him, honest to God. All respect to Ryan Seacrest. Nice guy. Got some interest. As soon as he went off of Kelly and Ryan, I stopped watching. I didn't want to see Kelly's bimbo husband sitting there talking about his underpants or whatever. Boring. But yeah, Ryan Seacrest. Well, Dave, that's a handful of jobs. How many people are Howard Stern or Ryan Seacrest or hey, I was offered a job. Okay, I'm going to tell you this, and this is going to be it. I'm going to stop, and this is going to be the end of the podcast because it's getting long. I'm way off script, and I'll uh, I'll have the new mixer up and running anyhow, and the bit will come off much better. But let me tell you something: how wrong parents and brothers and guidance counselors can be. And you know what? When I was 16 and talking about what do you want to do when you get out of school, Dave? I want to be a disc jockey. Is that right? Well, they don't make any money. It's real hard to get uh, picked up and hired and all that kind of stuff. This is what I heard. And my father was more from the point of view of because I said so, because I'm older than you, because I know better. I've lived a lot longer than you have, and you don't know anything, and I know everything. Not in that exact wording, but pretty much the gist of it. I'm an old, experienced adult who has conquered the world, and I know everything there is to know about life, and you know nothing, because you were just a couple of cells just a few years back, and what do you know? You grew up in this house, the great house that this house is, where you were fed. Yes, we actually allowed you to eat food off of our tables, and then you were allowed to go sleep in a bed, and you had your own room. How much luxury could you want? Anyways, we're telling you, be a lawyer, because they make a lot of money. Yeah, I guess the average lawyer around here, they say, I think it's something like 4 grand a week you can figure on, or a judge. 4 grand a week. Outrageous. To me, come on. You're talking 40 hours a week. You're lucky if a lawyer actually works 40 hours a week. But let's say they do. And divide the 4,000 into 40 hours. Well, guess what that comes out to? That's like $100 an hour. For what? You know, I've used lawyers in the past 20, 30 years or whatever, for, little things or whatever, just because the cop was an ass and you wanted to fight him in court and you wanted to buy the biggest, baddest lawyer in town to make him look like an idiot. And it was fun, Spend 4,000, make a cop look like an idiot, and drag him through the mud, and tell him, show him up in front of all of his buddies, And they don't know the law. While we're on that subject, I got news for you. There's 80 very thick books that are called the Pennsylvania Code, just the laws of the state of Pennsylvania, not Monroe County, not the township, not the association you live in, not the house you live in, not the federal government. They all have their own books and their own laws to study if you're a lawyer. You go into a courtroom, this is why lawyers specialize. It's kind of like being a doctor. You wouldn't want a guy who's a dermatologist to operate on your brain. You want a neurosurgeon for that, or to work on your bones. Or you don't want a regular family doctor, general practice, to do any of the special stuff. not with your body. So it's like that with lawyers. And, people who aren't lawyers and don't know lawyers and don't use lawyers are all real excited about, oh, my son's going to be a lawyer. We're trying to convince him to go to law school. Okay, so, you know, you're arguing over depressing stuff, and you're paid a shitload of money. There's no doubt about that. But you're screwing people over because most of your work in your office is done by your secretaries or your paralegal who goes and looks up the laws for you. And you basically go to court and wonder, gee, I wonder what my case is about. You get the papers out and see what your paralegal's written up for you and your secretary has mimeographed and filled in the blanks on your boilerplate cases. And you have the outrageous audacity to charge people $100 an hour to get them out of a parking ticket or whatever. And so there's so many different reasons I did not want to be a lawyer. I enjoyed reading about Abraham Lincoln, but I don't want to sit by firelight at night reading law books. That just sounds wrong. It's just spitting God in the eye. I've given you this life. You can go out and do anything you want to. You can go out and celebrate life by pursuing your passions and doing something you actually enjoy. People who tell you, oh, you won't make any money. Let me tell you my own case. And to tell you the truth, I didn't go whole hog at being a disc jockey from getting out of college because, I had heard so much shit about being a disc jockey that, geez, this sounds horrible. You have to live in your car and you starve sometimes and you can get fired so easily and there's no unions and then you have to find another radio station. Let me tell you what my experience was. And like I say, I kind of went at it part-time, half-ass because I was afraid to go full-blown invest all your chips in what you want to do because of my family and my guidance counselor and other people. And so, okay, so I get out of college and I look for something else to do that doesn't involve going to a school that once you go through law school, see, this is where they get you. Once you go through law school, you've got this huge bill. Like it could be $300,000 to go for 3 years of law school. And the books are easy. Lawyers don't study hard. College is much harder than law school. I don't care if you go to Harvard Law School. You think Harvard wants people to know that some people flunk out of Harvard? They don't let you flunk out. They bend over backwards and do everything they can to make sure you get that ticket at the end of 3 years but now that you've got that $300,000 debt, you want to go out and be a disc jockey? How are you going to pay your college loans back? You ain't. You're stuck. The only way for you to pay back your loans is to be in law school, or is to be a lawyer. So there you are, facing 5 ugly judges in courtrooms every day, arguing for people you don't know, about stuff you don't give a crap about. My neighbor's apples are dropping into my yard and it's causing my cat's indigestion. Well, pick up the damn apples, or move, or something like that. But, rich people will go to war and go to court for stupid stuff. Divorces. Well, she saw the kids half an hour longer last week than I did. And that's just not right. She's in breach of our divorce agreement and the settlement that we had. Well, you were the idiot who married her in the first place, or the one who you were too egocentric when you were just married to know how to treat a woman or what it's like to treat a woman. You don't know how valuable these female things can be for your life. In so many other ways besides just sex. I'll probably get into all that in future. But okay, I'm on my own story, and I promised this would be it for the night. And we're gonna stop this thing. Just hang in there. We're almost there. The horse is near the barn. He smells the hay. The carriage is easy to unhook. So so anyway, what I wanted to say was, uh, okay, everybody around me. Okay, to make it clear and put it in context, I was smart. I got good grades. Uh, my IQ results came back high. I mean, I'm in genius category high. And the guy at the state, let's see, what was it? The Social Security Center. Well, I had an IQ test in elementary school, and they gave me one in high school. And when I went to college, they give you one there. And if you get a job, or you get fired or unemployed, and you go to collect your Social Security weekly or whatever, they give you one there. And the guy sat me down and he said, "Listen, I thought your IQ was high. You're in the genius category, but your business IQ is out of sight." He said, "About one out of every 4,000 people has the talent for business that you possess naturally, without going to school, and without talking to people about, zeros and ones, and accounting." And oh my God, I thought if I had to be an accountant and do taxes for people the rest of my life, I would have shot myself after the first year. I can't think of any more uninteresting subject. That's worse than being a lawyer. But he said, "Okay, so listen, your talent, your intelligence, and your aptitude for business, you have to go back to college and get your MBA, get your master's in business, and then go out and run General Motors." And that's exactly what he said. And I'm not lying. Hand to God, hand on the Bible. He said, go get your MBA, go back to college, get your MBA degree, and when you get out, let General Motors know that you're available to run their company, because you can do it. And I said, "Well, that's very nice, but I want to be a disc jockey. I want to sit in an air conditioned studio and listen to the Beatles and the Beach Boys and talk to people on the phone." And the counselor for the state of Pennsylvania, basically you could read between the lines, and he was like, "You're an idiot! What the hell is wrong with you?" You can be a titan of business and industry. And I said, just not there. And okay, so that's half the story. The story about being pushed towards law school and a huge debt, which I knew that once you incurred that debt and went to law school, you couldn't turn around and go, "Man, I don't think I'll be a lawyer. I'm going to be a disc jockey," because you owe that big chunk of change. And the American Bar Association and every lawyer on this planet and all the law schools and colleges out there know it. Once you go through that law school, you're screwed. You're going to be nothing the rest of your life but a lawyer, because you got to pay off those damn bills. And then once you get it started to be paid off fairly well, you get used to the lifestyle. Gee, this is nice being able to buy a Mercedes for cash. This is nice being able to take trips to France every summer. This is nice being able to fly down to the Indy and watch the race in person. Stuff like that. And it was basically why my brother told me to be a lawyer. He said, he became a doctor. He became a dermatologist. I was in his office. I mean, back when he'd get 4 patients an hour, $100 for each patient, $400 an hour, 8 hours a day, and then he went on rounds in the hospital and stuff, 3,200 a day, and then you figure, let's say, lowball it, $4,000, $4,000 a day income before expenses. He had the rent and the insurance and the staff, the nurses and secretaries and stuff to pay. But $4,000, and it didn't even do 5 days a week. He dropped one of the days. I think he dropped Fridays. works 4 days a week. So, $16,000 a week will get you by. 160,000 in 10 weeks, 50 weeks, 5 times. That's $800,000 a year gross. But, there's expenses, big expenses. So let's say take home after taxes and after paying I'm guessing 400 grand a year. You can get by on that after taxes. And so anyways, that's where his head was at when he was a kid. It was make a lot of money so I can have a good life and, buy nice cars and not worry about money and eat when I want to, where I want to, buy the cars I want to buy, pursue the hobbies I want to have. And I was thinking to myself, well, that'd be nice if I wanted to be a doctor or had the science or math ability to be a doctor, or that'd be nice if I wanted to be a lawyer. And I thought it was interesting to go to a 100-year-old courthouse every day as my line of work and face these guys who didn't want to hear a stand-up routine of comedy. They wanted to hear serious stuff. And even when you stand there and read to them the exact pertinent laws that apply towards your case, the judge is still going to rule according to what he wants. What the area wants, what the people want. It may be legal for you to go on your neighbor's property to retrieve your cat because it's your personal property, and the Superior Court of Pennsylvania has made pets, dogs and cats, are personal property, and you have every damn right to go on their property, even if it's posted no trespassing. And if he has 80 cameras hanging out there, it's still your legal right in the state of Pennsylvania, according to Defense Against Trespass section. It's either like 807 or 507 in criminal code that says if your personal property is going to suffer immediate harm or danger because you can't go onto that property and retrieve that personal property, you can go onto that property and retrieve that personal property. Even if the guy's standing there threatening you and saying you can't do it. If you don't get your personal property and something happens to it, say it rains on the delivery from Amazon that your neighbor wouldn't let you get, or your cat or dog dies or gets injured on his property, and the guy wouldn't let you on his property, guess what? You can sue him. You can take him to court because that's against the law. But the judges around here don't know that. You have to actually read the criminal code to know that. And I stood up in a courtroom last year because I went onto my neighbor's property to get my cat back, who was sick and old. And I was worried about him, and he was long in coming back. And he used to live over there before the asshole bought the house. And, before the guy owned the house himself, we had a cat-friendly neighborhood. Nobody gave a damn if you came over through a yard to get a cat or a dog. We understood. They're pets. And they don't live in prisons. You don't have to keep your dog or cat in the house all day long because the guy next door to you is a turd who, shouldn't have been in the country in the first place. Oops. Did I say something like that? Now I must be a conservative Republican and watch Fox News. And I bet you he voted for Trump, too. And instead of that nice Mr. Joe Biden, who let all these nice people in our country. And so don't get me started. So anyway, hey, you know what? My best friend was an undocumented alien or illegal, whatever you want to call them. But that was years ago. And I don't know what I'd do without them. They're very nice people. They've helped me out a good many times. And I find her very interesting, So there are good ones and bad ones. And the guy who moved in next to me is a bad one. He might be MS-13 or Trent Diagra, as far as I know, because he certainly acts like it. And he's got the machete that he swings around, and he has no regard for plant or animal, bush or tree life. He owns construction equipment. He brought in, swear to God, I'm not making this up. He brought in bucket trucks, four of them, that sit on his property and haven't moved since he bought the house a year and a half ago. And I figure he was a human trafficker. And he went down with the bucket trucks to the border and he put the bucket up in the air and harvested people off of the top of the wall. You know, why else would somebody have four bucket trucks? Actually, he owns six. There's two more in Jersey because he had them over here at one time. There were six white unmarked vans. And, well, gee, maybe he collects white unmarked vans that are old and rusty with with buckets on them. Sure, you know. And the reason why he had them, he was either carting people up into the country, or what else could it possibly been going on? I don't think he was doing drugs. Maybe, you know, smuggling that stuff or something. But I found stuff online that I'm not going to go into here. Under the name of the owner of his house next door, which is a corporation name, and it's him. And you look up the records, you Google that, and all these government sites come up about his loans from the federal government during the PPP thing and, COVID-19, about a restaurant he owned, okay? And I Googled the address of the supposed restaurant, which is in a state 1,500 miles away. And guess what? The picture, the Google Earth shows 100 acres of parking lot. Ain't no restaurant there. But he's got a brand new Bobcat piece of construction equipment. He's got a brand new motorcycle and a brand new ATV, and he paid cash for his house. Gee, he just must have been a really good businessman. And I guess as soon as he came up here and took up his residence in Newark, New Jersey, he stopped being a restaurant owner because he's never there. I don't know. Let's just say, oh my God, there it is on paper and online proof. If the federal government ever connected the dots, his ass would be screwed to the wall because, it's people like that investigate that. But I called the FBI about stuff like this, and they said, listen, you know what? We got violent crimes out there and people killing people and violent stuff that we have to find murderers and that kind of thing. And those guys go first. And as far as white paper fraud and corruption, good luck. Because we have about 100,000 of those people who shredded the government when Biden was in office and said, oh, I have a business and I had to close it for COVID and I need to pay my workers so that they can take care of their cats and dogs. Well, okay, here's a couple 100,000. Will this help out, do you think, till next year maybe? Okay, I'll see what I can do if I can stretch it, And then the guy's driving a brand new car, and this happened over and over and over. Because you know what? Ain't nobody, the state police aren't trained in tracking down white collar crime. I mean, they've got a criminal code thing and they've got vehicle code. That's what they study. And gosh, they give them a whole 6 months, which they're also going through physical training and police procedures and stuff like that. And the same thing for the FBI. The FBI, their course is shorter. They have an 18-week course at Quantico, Virginia, on a Marine base, and a third of it is like physical training. They're really big on running and push-ups and being strong and being fast. You would think it's an NFL training camp, and then they casually go over the law, in case you're not a lawyer, and what else do? They have they've got they get them into shape and they train them on procedure and staying in shape and cursively just go quickly over the entire Constitution and federal laws, and things like that. And they sit all the new FBI agents down upon graduation, and they look at them and they say, "Now listen, drug dealers, people who are selling drugs to other Americans or other people, and they're not doctors and they're not in the medical profession, bad, bad guys." So, that's, we go catch those guys and try to find who they are. And we want to try to stop them from killing other people with these illegal drugs, fentanyl, that's being laced into everything now. Thank you, China. Thank you, Mexico. You know, and comes up by the ton, by the truckload, and a speck of this can kill a human being. Fentanyl really, really pisses me off that we're in this situation where we got, like, what is it, 300 Americans die every day of fentanyl overdose, or they buy a drug, and even prescription drugs, and it's laced with fentanyl. They die because there's a drug in their regular drugs that shouldn't be there, and really pisses me off. You get to a sore point when you talk about people taking advantage of people who are trying to get better or escape pain somehow, and they're given this crap that's made in China or Mexico or in South America that these drug lords sell just because they can get rich that way. And God bless them, there's a special place in hell for them just waiting for them. And all this by way of saying, what? Okay, what was the other half of the story I was supposed to tell? I told you about the shove towards being I know, shove towards being a lawyer that came from family, friends, guidance counselors, teachers, state employees, at social security bureaus and stuff, telling me, well, you're smart, you got the ability, you got to be a lawyer. That's the way it goes. Just like you turn 65, well, you got to go to Florida and retire. Everybody who retires, they go to Florida. People from New York, they've worked in New York City all their lives. It's too bad that we're going to miss you because you're going to Florida, but that's the law. And, okay, so enough about the people pushing me towards law, because you're going to make a lot of money and life will be great. And then you find out, God, nobody was able to tell me what is it like to be a lawyer. Nobody ever told me that. Nothing. I had to actually get involved in the processes, in the legal stuff now and then, just to find out what the hell do these guys do all day. My ex-wife, boy, she hates when I say that. But she's down in Texas now. She can't beat me up anymore. No, she never beat me up. Not where it showed, anyhow. But she worked for a lawyer. She was personal secretary, or I guess the executive assistant for a female lawyer in town here. And before I met her, she was a legal secretary. And she couldn't tell me what lawyers did, but I know what she did. She took forms and papers and filled out statistics and, just filled out forms and filed them and put them in the mail and sent them places, and had a stack of mail to send out every day. And the lawyers, they showed up in the courtroom with papers that, she might have mimeographed, or the paralegals. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, just God's way of saying, time to shut up, Dave. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you the other half. Not only what they were shoving me towards that they shouldn't and had no business shoving me towards, but where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And everybody gave me this doomsday scenario. You won't pay bills. You'll be poor. You won't have a nice wife, probably. You can get somebody to sleep with you, something like this. So let me tell you how it worked out. In the real world, me having a strong passion and interest towards the music industry and, you know, getting into being a disc jockey. And first day I hit Jacksonville, uh, I made up a resume. I went to a resume service. The guy charged me $50 to take all my stats of what was on paper and turn it into a professional looking resume. And I went around to 30 different TV and radio stations in Jacksonville. And the last one I went into, they hired me on the spot. He said, "Yeah, we need somebody to load the tapes and run the shows, especially early morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. You show up, you turn on the transmitter, you turn on the transmitters and get the station going, and try not to burn the place down, you know, while you're doing your job. And at 10 o'clock, somebody comes in and you go home and relieves you, but they don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be at the station at 5 o'clock in the morning. You do." And it was an easy job. It was an air-conditioned building. They have to. The transmitter was right there in the studio or near the studio. And if they didn't use air conditioning, they'd burn the thing up, and that would cost them $1 million to replace the thing. It was like 100-foot tower at least outside. Big tower. It might have been 200 or 300 feet tower. And there was a couple of them, a couple big towers out there. And lightning storms would come by, and the lightning would hit these towers. You could hear them. It would shake it like it was a pot on a stove, just and the whole tower out there, this big 300-foot tower, just hit by lightning. Every time there was a thunderstorm, and I never worried about it falling on the station. Why would I worry? The building was strong enough. I think it was concrete walls that it wouldn't hurt me or hit me or anything, and I wouldn't get electrocuted. They grounded the things so that, you know, 4 million volts goes in and it goes somewhere, but it didn't come up into the control board. And that's what made me happy. That's all I worried about. And uh, so it was like falling off a log for me to get a job as a disc jockey in Florida, okay, in big markets, in Jacksonville, in Tampa. Uh, I was working at an AM station in Lakeland, Florida, which is 25 miles east of Tampa and St. Pete and Clearwater, right? 25 miles away from Tampa, and 5,000-watt AM station. And the program director for the biggest, most popular, largest income radio station in the Tampa area calls me. I'm on the air doing a shift at this little AM station which played light rock, which is basically music to commit suicide by. It's Torn Between Two Lovers, Maureen McGregor, uh, Weekend in New England, Barry Manilow. Those are songs that make you want to slash your wrists. And light rock was slow, easy going, no heavy rock, no hard rock, no fast rock, light rock. Or if you have to do the overnight shift, which was what I was doing. If you did 11 o'clock at night till 5 in the morning, it, oh God, you think it was bad listening to that stuff in the daytime? Try it at night when nobody's around and it's quiet and this slow music's playing and you're sleepy anyhow. It's normal time for humans to be in bed, and this music's playing and it's slow, plodding, depressing crap. And uh, where was I going with that? Anyway, program director from the number one station in Tampa calls me. WRBQ, Q105, Q105, WRBQ Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Clearwater, the home of rock and roll, or whatever, and a CBS station. And it's funny how I always kind of wind up around CBS stations and CBS stuff. I programmed Last FM channel for classic rock, which was bought by CBS. CBS bought Last FM, an internet site that plays your favorite music by genre, and CBS paid Last FM's developers $250 million. $250 million. And I just, got together 4,000 of my favorite songs growing up, and I like 300 or 400 artists, and put them together on paper, and they loaded their computer algorithms into it, which nobody knows about anymore. They did this stuff, and they realized if we get everybody doing these computer algorithms with artificial intelligence to play this music that they loved, nobody's ever gonna ever again listen to a regular FM station that's playing classic rock. Why would you? I mean, the jock can't compete against a computer. He doesn't know how to put together songs like a DJ at a dance club to keep them on the floor. I knew the guts of this. I know how they did it. It's easy, but it takes a lot of work. It's like zeros and ones. It's easy to put together a sure flow of music for a radio station that people won't turn off because there's something in their subconscious they can't, because the songs, it's all the same song, because it goes from one four-man classic rock male group to another four-man classic rock group that's playing two guitars and one synthesizer with higher, every factor that you could put in that's a characteristic, that's an identifier of a song, was put in for every song that was put in there. And then the computer would just take stuff with similarities and put them together, and play that song and once, and you would say, "Boy, I would have never guessed that that song following that other song would go well. But boy, that sure sounded great." And they did this, and they said, "This is the end of FM radio. The whole radio industry, the broadcast industry of FM is going to die because the internet's coming up, and it's got these algorithm classic rock stations, and gosh, all you need to do is throw in some commercials and people go, oh, this is better than any station I've ever heard before." Well, of course it is. But, uh, so where was I going with that? Anyways, up here in Pennsylvania, it's a different story. You got 2, 3 little hick mom and pop radio stations, low wattage. They don't reach a lot of people. Lucky if they get to the Lehigh Valley from here. I mean, they barely cover Stroudsburg. You get into the wrong part of your living room and you lost them. And oh man, these stations around here, they don't know how to run a station, and the guys inside of them think they're really smart. So, well, we've been doing this for decades, and we wouldn't be here today and making money if we didn't know what the hell we were doing. I said, you know what? You got a monopoly. Nobody else around here supplies classic rock music but you. Nobody else around here supplies country music except you. Nobody else around here supplies that crappy popular music that passes for modern music. It's all basically female, good-looking young blondes with, click tracks, and they got drum machines, and they can squeal out some kind of song or something, and they're billionaires. And that's what you have in this area. You got people playing classic hit pop radio, and you got people playing country, and you got people playing popular music that's being made now, today, by the machine, because, well, she's a young blonde, she's pretty cute, she's got good long hair, if her voice sucks, we'll get other people to write songs for her and we'll dub in her vocals. And there you go. That's so if you want to listen to either one of any one of those three genres, you don't have a choice if you're in your car. You know, well, you can get Sirius XM satellite, or you can get one of these three local stations, or you can wait till you get home and you can, or use your smartphone and pop it into your docking thing and with your stereo, and you can play music off of that from the internet. You know, you can program your own music on YouTube. So, uh, so it's tough up here, and they don't pay much. And the people that work at those stations are kind of grumpy because they don't get paid much, and it was hard to get the job, and it's hard to keep the job because there's a lot of people around who'd like to be a disc jockey and sit in a studio in an air-conditioned room and listen to their favorite music. So, but not in Florida. I mean, they're desperate for DJs down there. They're calling little stations in Lakeland and say, "Hey, how'd you like to come over here, Q105, and be on the air, and get paid a ton of money?" And where I was at, I was making I guess I was making minimum wage at the little AM station in Lakeland, but it was fun and I liked it, and it paid, 30, 40 hours a week, and they didn't communicate to me well about, hey, it's okay to be popular and develop a show and have your own personality, because they were scared to death of somebody becoming a Howard Stern and getting wiped off the air by the FCC. So, you know, um, down there, and this guy calls me up, and he liked the voice, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "How much do you guys gross a year? What does your station pull in?" Now remember, we're talking 1985. 95, 05, 15, 25. This is 40 years ago. Their station was making in advertising revenues per year $20 million. $20 million. So, what do you think they paid the disc jockeys? Well, at my station, I know what we were making because I asked management and the owners, "What are you guys bringing down in ad revenues a year?" I said, "We're making $1 million a year. $1 million a year." And that was supporting two stations, an FM and an AM station, you know, and they were paying everybody minimum wage type stuff. So, today that's what, $8 an hour? Something like that. And, 30 hours a week, here's your $300 a week. Live on it. It's okay. I like my job, you know. And, but 20 times what we were making there, thinking it's entirely possible they were making about $5,000, $6,000 a week, which, today's money, uh, $250,000 a year isn't bad for sitting in an air-conditioned studio listening to music of the Beatles and the Beach Boys and talking to people on the phone. And every once in a while, try to say something witty and read the USA Today newspaper and talk about something that's, in the news. And that's all they want out of you. And so I'm thinking, geez, if Q105 and Mason Dixon were looking for disc jockeys and I'm good enough to be on their radio station, what are the other stations in the area? What kind of shape are they in? So I came up here when my father died to help take care of the mother because I grew up around here and she didn't know what she was doing when Dad was dead, driving herself around and getting groceries, putting gas in the car and stuff like that. I said, well, I can do this stuff anywhere. You come up here, it's like reaching the Western Wall, the Berlin Wall. I mean, it's hard to get radio station jobs up here. And I said, I worked at the station that was rated by Rolling Stone magazine the number one station in the country for college radio stations. Not only did I work at that college radio station, I was the program director. I'm the guy who had the final say on the music and shit like that, And nothing. And I think what's going on is the guys up here are very protective of their jobs. He said, well, one thing we damn sure don't want is somebody more qualified than us, because that means one of us is going, or he'll change the whole thing and change the chemistry of the station. We sure as hell don't want that, you know. So, uh, I knew I blew the guy away a couple of years ago. I made up a resume, told him where I worked, told him what I did, told him the contacts I had, told him about setting David Lee Roth up with dates when he came to my club. The disc jockey told him that I was the flagship uh, nightclub for the ABC Liquor Lounge that went by JD Penguins, but ABC owned them, and they had 50 of them in Florida, including Tampa. They had nightclubs in Tampa and Orlando and Miami and Lakeland and Jacksonville and all over the state. And I was their number one disc jockey. And the guy who was my musical nightclub supervisor said to me, he said, you know, you're the only disc jockey in his lounges that the CEO knows the name of. They know your name. And when they wanted to know what was wrong with our clubs as a chain across the state, that they weren't doing as well compared to other area nightclubs and bars, did I have any suggestions? I gave them a 5 point. I said, I know absolutely what's wrong. You've got linoleum kitchen floors for a dance floor. Other clubs have lights in the floor. You don't have the lights going on, overhead. Your sound system is antiquated. You need to upgrade and update the stuff and loosen up on the music. And I forget what else I told them, or what was. And I said, your name. I mean, you got these other clubs around called everything, and you're calling your clubs the ABC Liquor Lounge. So does that sound like a classy place you want to take your woman on a Friday or Saturday night for a couple of drinks and some fun on the dance floor? No, you're living back in Richie Cunningham's day, happy days. This isn't the 70s anymore. I said, you got to get a cool name with an image, something that's going to express your club. And they came up with it, and it was pretty good. JD Penguin, And I think JD, that was the CEO or the owner. His name was Jack Holloway. Right, I forget what it was. JD, but that was an original founder or something. JD Penguins, and great name. And they doubled, they doubled their sales and the people coming through the door. But there's always something changing in the area. A country club came. It was a country area, a lot of rednecks, and a club came in where the DJs were playing country music, and the club I was in said, "This is another club now. This wasn't JD Penguins. It was a bigger club in the same town, and it seemed like a better gig." And they said that club across town, the Texan, is killing us because they're playing country music and they're packed. And I said, well, I ain't playing country music. I'm sorry. Not my gig. No passion there. I do not want to sit here and spin. I can't even, I don't even know. I mean, I know Garth Brooks was a country singer, and the guy who had a son who had the same name, they were both country singers that were big. Isn't that terrible? I said, you want me to play, in addition to playing classic rock and dance music, you want me to play country music by guys who sing through their nose and play slide guitars. I said, yep, it'll bring in the money. And I said, well, I don't know that. Nice knowing you, I quit. And I packed up all my records and left because, if your heart's not into it, this is a big lesson in life. It doesn't matter if it's a job choice or a music choice or the girl you're choosing to get with to marry. If your heart's not into it, stay the hell away. It's not worth the grief. It's your life, and if you like it, man, that's pay right there. If you enjoy the job you got, you enjoy the girl you're with, and you enjoy the music you listen to, that's all that counts. You got it made. I mean, there are millionaires are shooting their brains out because they're miserable. They're rich, but they hate what they do. Lawyers hate being lawyers. I know. I've talked to them. And it's a depressing, evil industry. And they don't want to be a lawyer, but it makes a lot of money. What else are they going to do? So, tonight's lesson on dirty little secrets about life. And, before you get to that age where you go, geez, if I knew back then, when I was making those choices and decisions, what I know now, I sure as hell wouldn't have become a lawyer, that's for sure. Uh, you know, I would have done something different. Things would have gone better. Okay, and the truth is, now that I'm at that age where people spend most of their time going, geez, if I would have known back then what I know now, I would have done this or that. And see, there's people back there now. There are people of that age who are in their teens, late teens, early 20s, early 30, in their 30s, who are on the wrong track, going down the wrong course because they've been pushed there, because their parents or their brothers or their relatives or their teachers and their guidance counselors are idiots, or even their friends. So, oh, you know math, you can do calculus. Boy, you can do science and math. You can be a doctor. You can be rich. You should be a doctor. You got to go into med school because you can make a lot of money and everybody likes you and everybody thinks you're smart and handsome and rich and, you know, and sorry, that's not the bottom line, purified, distilled truth of how to be happy in life. You don't go chasing the money. You go chasing the passion, what you want to do, because that's God's little seed inside of you going, hey, I've got some surprises for you. And in between me disc jockeying in clubs, just casually going around town and handing out resumes, and one of them says, you're hired, you know. I would try other things. I wrote screenplays, co-wrote them with another writer down in Lakeland. I tried restoring classic cars. I thought that would be cool, and I could be my own boss. I tried music. We started a rock group. Yeah, who doesn't want to be a rock star? If five will get you 10. If you tell me you want to be a disc jockey when you get out of school or college or whatever, take communications major and be a DJ or something, on-air personality, I'll bet you your higher goal is you always wanted to be a rock star, you know? And that thing passed in front of me if I would have made choices. But it was full of risk, a lot of risk, because, you think it's hard being a DJ. How about making it as a rock and roll group? And I lived in an area of Florida. We were filthy with rock stars. I mean, they'd stop at the clubs, and they're always coming through town. I mean, I had an apartment 3-4 blocks away from the Civic Center, and we were always getting AC/DC and Aerosmith and all the big groups came through, and the really big groups, the super groups, they came through to Tampa. They came to the Sun Dome, which held 30,000 people. The Rolling Stones. Who was big? Led Zeppelin when they were touring, and those guys, and all the big super groups. If you can name a super group that toured, they came to the Tampa area. Def Leppard. Some of the people, they kept it on the down low, but I know that rock stars and or their parents had homes in the area. Just rattling off top of my head, David Lee Roth, parents lived in Lakeland. Um, let's see, Def Leppard, drummer, had a house in St. Petersburg or Clearwater. I know because the guy at the door, the security guy at the door of the biggest music store in the Tampa area, uh, was friends with what was his name? I should know his name. God, I should know. He lost an arm in a Corvette rollover in England, in Ireland, and he was, Def Leppard's drummer. Rick Allen, was it Rick Allen? And he was friends with the security guy at the door because he had a house there, and they hung out at bars and stuff. And he even said to me one time, the security guy said, we're looking to get a Yes cover group up, and we know that you're trying to be in the vocals area. Um, would you want to come and try out and for a Yes cover group? And he said, but we rub elbows with people that you would absolutely shit if you knew who we spent time with in bars. But we don't publicize it because they'd have to move. Everybody would come and be at their door and bugging them. And I don't know. When I was just hanging out at the back doors of the Lakeland Civic Center, this is how easy it is in that area to get jobs in the music industry or radio. Um, Gosh, I put a little bulletin board card up in a music store, and I got calls about guys who wanted to be in a group. I thought, wouldn't that be fun to just start a rock group? And I picked out a name. It's a name that is being used today, but it's not us. It wasn't us. And somehow they heard about us and the name we came up with, and they decided to use it. And they have albums out. And that's how hot the area was. You just float an idea and it goes to seed. And Rush, the rock group Rush, came through town. I like Rush. I love their music. And Slayer had offered me a job on sound, and David Lee Ross touring company had offered me a job in electrical. Preparing all the stuff for the lights and speakers and everything. And I turned those down. I didn't want to do that stuff. And I didn't want to tour with a group I didn't like either. Slayer. I wasn't real big on guys who made altar calls for the devil. And okay, um, Rush. I was just hanging out the back doors and talking and everything, and I was in good shape back then. I was in really good shape in the 80s. I was like in Olympic shape as far as heart rate and wind and ability to run. And I was in a town that where martial arts were big, and I took some martial arts. Churches were offering martial arts programs. And I had a guy, I looked a little like Chuck Norris back then when Chuck Norris was younger, and I had a guy come up to me who owned a dojo for Kung Fu. And he said, if you'll come and take Kung Fu at my dojo, I'll give you 6 months of, of Kung Fu lessons for free. That's just the kind of area it was. We had a Grand Master living in town who ran a Taekwondo dojo out of the church, out of a big church. And it didn't cost hardly anything to take the lessons, so. So Rush said, we need security. We'll start you at $800 a week, and you'll tour with the group. And, we'll see. And back in 1985, $800 a week was nothing to sneeze at. I suppose it's probably like getting about $1,500 a week now. Somebody offers you 75, 80,000 a year for touring with a popular rock group who you love in 3 big stretch tour buses. Hell yeah. But I turned it down. Why did you turn that down, Dave? Dream job with a dream group. Okay. That's a very good question. It reaches right in there with anxiety disorders and fear of failure and stuff like that. Um, why would you turn down a job at a big radio station in the area, which was your dream job? Well, I was okay. They say the way you know you have generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, general anxiety disorder, is if you think the outcome of every situation is always going to be the worst possible thing you can think of, and you worry about that stuff, and you stay up at night, and it keeps you up worrying about that stuff. Well, you know what? They'll hire me at that big radio station that's famous, making all that money, and all those cool guys there, and they'll fire me after 2 weeks. They'll go, this guy's just a regular schlub from a high school, and has had a few colleges. He's got a decent voice. He knows about the music. Yeah, hell yeah, I could have done the job. All I had to do is not step on the wrong toes. Keep my nose clean with the management and owners. And they're raking in 20 million a year. Hell yeah, the disc jockeys made 5 grand a week back in 1985. So, but you know, it takes a while to figure out that you don't think like a healthy, normal brain should think as far as opportunities. A really good looking hot girl asks you out, and you go, what the hell is wrong with her? Why would a girl like her go out with a guy like me? you know, and it's not as if I didn't have help thinking that way from my older brothers. Well, my oldest brother, when he went in the Navy, he was a jet pilot, and everybody was, oh, geez, he's a jet pilot in the Navy, and my other brother became a doctor, and uh, if I would have gone into the armed services, I didn't have to escape a draft or anything. But I always thought the Air Force would have been cool because they got the toys, and NASA is under the Air Force and all that. And well, my cousin got so close to NASA, he writes medical papers for them. Uh, he works with NASA, and his results go up into space, and they do experiments with rats in space based on my cousin's uh, medical papers. He's kind of a research scientist, and he's working on, I don't know, cancers and stuff like that. He used to work for the government in a job he couldn't tell us about that was secret back back when he was first out of college and med school. And so anyway, if you're in a passion about a job and you're in the right area, and it seems like God will find a way to get you to the right area. They'll just be snapping at you like fly fishing at flies. The little gnats that are out at night in the summertime. The little gnats running around and the fish jumping out of the water to get them. That's the way it'll be. People after you to work in their place, and they'll offer you jobs, and you'll turn them down, and they'll go back to their offices and go, what the hell is wrong with that guy? We just offered him a job that he loves, in an area he loves, doing something he loves, for a lot of money. And he said no. What the hell is wrong with him? You know. Well, I had brothers and a father and guidance counselors and teachers, and they programmed me. And this is what you got when you're programmed by German Lutherans in and don't think just because people go to a Lutheran church that they're Christians, because they're not. Some of your meanest, nastiest, most underhanded, sneakiest, stealingest, thievingest people go to church on Sunday. And I'm not just saying that. I know that for a fact. And, well, the mafia goes to Mass. If John Gotti went to Catholic Mass on Sundays because he knew he was shooting people and killing people and selling them drugs and, putting bodies in bags through the week. So he'd go to church on Sunday, and he'd say 3 Hail Marys and a couple Our Fathers. He'd confess his sins. He'd say, I'm sorry, God, I really shot a lot of people this week. Boy, I know that's wrong. Forgive me. and they'd pat his head, and he'd go out and he'd give them $25,000 for the offering. And where you have gangsters, they go to church and they think they're okay. And I know this for a fact. And we'll get into that later too, maybe somewhere down the line. Um, so what I'm saying is, don't be an idiot. Do what you want. And when the job that you've always dreamed of and are passionate about stares you in the face, take it. The worst that can happen is, so what if you do lose the job in a couple weeks and they go, well, what were we thinking? He's not quite the right fit for this. Man, you almost made it. And if that radio station didn't want you, you still have 29 others in the area that you can go to. And they'll go, holy crap, look who we got. It's a throwaway from Q105. And yeah, there's a radio voice to it too. And I used to do the radio voice, but I can't right now. Like I said, I've got this thing with my voice. How long have I been talking straight? It's 8:30. I've been talking 3.5 hours. You wonder, were you born to be a DJ, Dave? Well, let's see. I don't use music or commercials. And I've been talking for 3.5 hours straight. Oh my God! It's time for me to go. And we're going to try to wrap this up and see if we can get this uploaded so that it can be an effort worth having done. And it's been great talking to you. I've enjoyed myself. This is like therapy. How about a little outro music? And this is domain, public domain music, free for the taking. It's on a site that puts out that kind of music. Like from the X-Files, It's just so cool. I found this, and this is what I'm going to use for Dirty Little Secrets, for my theme song. It's called Night Whispers. And I'm going to start doing shows at night too, with like the lights almost all out. You'll just see shadows and glimpses. And I'm gonna be talking about things that are interesting to me. And you know what? Somebody else out there is looking to hear what I have to say. But what I'm saying is, if you ever said, geez, if I had only known back then, what I know now, I would blah, blah, blah. This show is your show. That's what this is all about. It's all about talking about stuff that should be taught in school and is not. Guidance counselors don't tell you, teachers tell you, but damn, they sure shove biology 1 and 2 down the throats of people who want to be English majors. That's a real good use of students' time. Oh, and don't forget Pennsylvania geography. Oh, we got to know where Pittsburgh is to get along in life, Well, it is if you live in Pittsburgh, but I mean, it was like they walk through a library and go, what kind of old useless crap can we occupy these guys' times with till their parents get home from work, babysit the kids through the day till they're 18. And then we kick them out and put them in college. And then, oh man, you thought the stuff was useless in high school. Wait till you get to college and you start. Well, actually, some of the stuff was pretty cool. Like Muhlenberg, in astrophysics, I learned how to navigate in the universe, using the North Star and stuff like that. Actually, geology is pretty cool. I liked studying what's happening down underneath the surface of the Earth and how rocks are made and things. So astrophysics and geology, and I tell you, international politics is interesting because law is not interesting. What laws are and what you can do and can't do, not interesting. But when you get to talk about possible nuclear wars between giant nations and the balance of power and how they go about as politicians, keeping the world not blown up from day to day, it's called mutually assured destruction. You make sure that you have enough nuclear weapons and bad things in your army that you can destroy the other side. Whoever, even if they launch first, you make sure that your stuff, even if you're all dead, it can launch itself, which it's what Russia has. It's the dead man button, the dead man button. There doesn't have to be anybody alive in Soviet Russia, and they have computers which will launch from underground bunkers and submarines, will launch nuclear warheads at the United States and just destroy us totally. And right now, we have no defense for that. We can shoot at ICBMs. They've tried to develop laser weapons and stuff like that, but till we get this Golden Dome thing up, we're screwed. If China or Russia decides, you know what, we're going to put 100 nuclears on the United States and just take them out of the equation, they probably would all get through, and our nation would be screwed, and we'd be back in the Stone Age. And but the reason that doesn't happen is because we have thousands of warheads underground, in the ocean, in submarines, up in the air at all times, in B-1 and B-2 stealth bombers. Nuclear warheads, we can deliver, like, for a B-2 bomber, I think they can deliver 16 1 megaton nuclear devices by one airplane. We got 22 of those. So, we can take any nation we want to off the face of the earth. The only thing is, if they aren't doing the same thing, oops, because they're going to take us off the face of the earth. And that's mutually assured destruction. And that's the way China and Russia and the United States keep a balance of power. And that's why Donald Trump's so nervous right now, because we almost have the United States in direct warfare with Russia. And, both sides know we can't go nuclear on this, because if we do, that's it. Game, set, match. The earth is done. Even the cockroaches won't survive a nuclear winter, and all the radiation that will cause the cancers and kill off all the animals and the plants and the trees. Boy, you think New Yorkers coming to the Poconos was a bad news for forests and lakes and streams. You have a nuclear winter on the planet, and we're back to cockroaches and earthworms if we're lucky. In 100 years from now, they'll start working their way up again, to, I don't know, slugs and fish. And maybe something will crawl up onto land and start walking upright. But, given a few million years or whatever. So that's where we're at. And there are interesting subjects to study out there. And, really neat things like sitcoms and comedies to write for somebody who that's their thing. And that's what excites them. And if you're a guidance counselor or a teacher or a parent or a brother or a sister, don't you ever dare tell one of your siblings or one of your kids that what they want to do for a living, for their life, is stupid, or it won't work out, or they can't do it. What if they are the Howard Stern? What if they are the Ryan Seacrest? What if they are the Walt Disney? What if they are, you get my drift, what if they are the Jeff Bezos and they start an Amazon? You know what? Everybody told Amazon. I remember when I was buying stock for Amazon back in the year 2000, everybody that were professional, degreed, hotshot financial analysts said this will never work. A mail order, a store that has to deliver stuff, or that's mail order, or that's selling books. Oh boy, that is not on the internet. That's like next thing to fake money, like Bitcoin. Oh, money that's faith-based, that some kid thought up, ways to value invisible stuff that doesn't exist as Bitcoins. So genius is in the mind of the passionate one. And whatever is in your kids' passions, go with it. And put your seatbelt on because it's going to be a wild ride. And, you know, I just kind of went after the disc jockeying stuff at the bigger stations because I wanted to find out, is it true? Is it so hard to get a really good job in this industry? Is it that tough to get or keep the job? And you know, is it that rare that I couldn't make it? I'd be starving. Man, I didn't put any effort into landing the jobs I got, and some of the jobs came to me. Rush's tour manager asking me, "You want to be security for Rush? We'll pay you $800 a week." And guess what? You get to get on one of the 3 buses with Rush and party for the whole tour. If it lasts 8 months, you're on the bus 8 months, and all you have to do is keep people off the stage. And you're healthy. You went to the gym 3 times a week. You know some martial arts, and you got a great body. Your heart rate is that of an Olympic swimmer. You're hired if you want it. And the jobs are out there, and that job came to me. All I was doing was standing there watching the Rush buses come, and they knew these guys would take a bullet for us because they're standing out here and they love us. And this is who you want for security. And that's how rock stars pick their security guys. And David Lee Roth, I was just standing there around the electricians when they were working on stuff, and the guy said, "Hey, do you know how to make this or that or that? How would you like a job for the tour on electrical?" And Slayer, the group Slayer, offered me a sound position, and I thought about it, and a guy contacted me who was an employer, like an agency, for rock stars in the area. They were touring through. And he said, "We need you over at the Orlando Civic Center this coming Saturday night," or whenever it was. "Can you be at the Orlando Civic Center half an hour early, and you get paid X number of dollars an hour, and we want you to help out with the sound crew for Slayer?" And I said, "Okay." But, I changed my mind. But the jobs, the point I'm trying to make is the guidance counselors were wrong. The brothers were wrong. The parents were wrong. My friends were wrong. Teachers were wrong. Everybody who said, "Oh, this is hard to get," it was easy. Landing any of those jobs, the jobs came to me. I didn't go to them. They came to me. And, I don't know what's wrong with Pennsylvania. I think it's cursed. I mean, because it's not like they couldn't have good radio stations up here that people would listen to. Who's listening to these things up here? Why would anybody listen to these stations? I mean, I don't like the DJs that are on them. The music playlist is terrible. They don't know how to string together the right songs to follow each other to keep people interested. I don't know why they're open. I don't know how they pay their bills. And, it's a conundrum to me because I kind of go up to them. I've gone up to 2 of the stations. I'm not going up to the pop station. I couldn't stand doing that. I would blow my brains out having to listen to Beyonce and all those guys. Even the country station, that's off the charts. Okay, I wouldn't go to the country station. So it's this classic rock station. I went to them. I told them without saying it out loud, "Listen, I'm your dream come true. I'm the answer for what you need. I know how to be a music director for your station. I can sell to Fortune 500 companies ad times. I know how to figure out the angles for your money, for your ad campaigns, and the music you need to be playing. And I know when the fuck to shut up when I'm a DJ on the air and I'm playing music. If you're not funny and you don't have a funny joke and it's not witty, shut up and play the music." It's just that simple. But, you got these guys who are trying to prove something. That want to prove that they're a morning drive guy who's got nothing but one machine gun joke after another one. Jokester. And the jokes aren't funny. And he looks pathetic. And you go, why did the station hire this guy? Why don't they just put tapes on and let a computer run run the music and play the commercials. It's better than having to listen to the dribble coming out of these guys. So, I don't know. But this whole area has a problem. Pocono Mountains. I live in the Pocono Mountains. And a lot of jobs are like that. You're like, what the hell is this guy doing in this business that he's working in? Because he's terrible. I know a store owner who opened up a number of different food type stores. I mean, okay, restaurants. I don't want to get too close to the core here because I would feel really bad if they found out that I was talking about them this way. But they don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, uh, and all you have to do is turn on TV and watch the food shows, and they'll educate you how to be a great chef and how to run a good restaurant and how to make people happy and how to make people keep coming back. It's Gordon Ramsay. I don't know how many times on Kitchen Nightmares or Hell's Kitchen he said, keep it simple. If you get complicated, you get in trouble. It's how Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's, you know what? He sold hamburgers, cheeseburgers, milkshakes, uh, Coca-Colas, and French fries. That was it. And he sold them lower than anybody else in the country. And people stampeded McDonald's and built it into the largest fast food restaurant on the planet. And, the answers are out there. And there's people that know the answers for you. But, wow, I just watched this person have one business go bankrupt after another. And they're running it exactly the opposite way of how they should be running it. They're using like ground meat for hamburgers that's frozen. They pull it out of freezers in order to. Nobody wants to go to a mall to eat a frozen hamburger bun a frozen hamburger that's burnt on the outside and raw in the center. And it tastes like the bottom of a shoe. There's no flavor in it because it's been frozen. And the same thing for chicken. You can't freeze chicken and serve it and have people go, delicious. But all the McDonald's stuff and all the Burger King stuff, that's all frozen. But they're another angle. They're working cheap and they're working with limited menus. And this person, not only were they using frozen foods at extremely high prices in a mall, but they had like 100 items on their menu. People in malls aren't going to stop and sit down for half an hour to study a menu to see if there's anything on it they might like. But if they pass by a big picture of a hamburger and they see them grilling and they know they're pulling out fresh ground meat and throwing it on a grill, hey, damn, maybe $2 a piece? Hell yeah, give me a couple of those. But $5 a piece? And you're pulling out some stanky thing that's been in a freezer for 4 weeks, and you serve it on a cold bun, and the cook is cooking 100 different things, so they don't know how to cook any of them well. They aren't trained. They don't watch Gordon Ramsay on TV saying, you know what, you want to cook a great burger? You do it medium rare. You put on garlic and onion powder and salt and pepper, and you toast the bun, and you use fresh cheese, and you use fresh hamburger, and use it at this temperature for this many minutes. They'll tell you how to be successful. Or you want to run a pizza joint and you're next to a university with 5,000 starving hungry co-eds? Oh my God. Just meet the prices of the rest of the parlors in town and you'll be rich. Don't charge more, for God's sake, than the chain down the street that's selling pizza. Try to undercut them if you can. If you can't undercut them, you say, I can't undercut them. We only sell 3 pizzas an hour. Well, it's because your pizzas are too damn expensive. They're $5 over the chain that's right next to their campus that's selling pizzas for $8 for a large pie. And that's why they're selling 200 pies an hour. When I worked at Pizza Hut, and I worked at Pizza Hut as a chef for a year, way back when. This is before they didn't tell you what was it. We as cooks at Pizza Hut back then had to put together the ingredients, the raw ingredients. We knew what was in the dough. We knew what the spices were in the sauce, and we knew how they made the cheese. And it wasn't frozen. It was made fresh and mixed on the site. And you know what? On a Friday, from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 10 o'clock at night, 7 hours, we turned out pizzas as fast as we could make them. And that was two cooks working side by side, working at top speed for 7 hours, making pies, pizza pies, as fast as we could make them. And we already had the dough made, and we already had it all sitting in the fridge waiting to come out. Slap it out, throw down the sauce that already has, and then we knew how to spice them, but I think we usually spiced the sauce beforehand. And the cheese was already grated in big bins. I mean, we'd reach for the dough, spread it out on a pan, then we'd put the sauce down on the pie, and then we'd take the cheese and measure a cup size and spread that out over the pizza, and bam, into the oven. And I'm talking, that's how fast and how many pies we were making. I don't know what the total was, but it was awesome. Because there was another guy right next to me who at 10 o'clock was as sweaty and dirty as I was and was working elbow to elbow. And we had, I think we had 2 pizza ovens that we were ramming full. And, Pizza Hut didn't have a lot of items back then. You want a pizza? What do you want on it? You want a thin crust or a thick crust? Oh, and we also have meatball sandwiches, and we serve Coca-Cola. That's it. That's all they served. A big, huge, worldwide chain known that people come into and throw their money at waitresses. Please give me your pizzas. Give me this. Give me that. It was made fresh. It was made in 500-degree ovens. It was made in dirty old blackened pans. And we'd take those dirty old pans out that would give them a nice golden crust and throw that onto a nice shiny serving pan. And they'd take them out, and the people would suck those suckers down, and they'd be back next Friday. Business isn't hard. People make it hard. The answers are all over everywhere. If you can just read the situation. Music business isn't hard. Getting a job in the music business isn't hard. But you have to have owners and managers and program directors who know what the hell they're doing. And, sadly, in the little stations, they don't. That's why they're little. They're a little station. It's not because they're in a little area. It's because they have little minds and they don't know what they're doing. You go to the big giant stations, they know what they're doing. And they're smart. And they can spot people who know they know what they're doing. And they want to hire those people because they know they'll suck up everything they can learn there. Because they know what they're doing. Because they're making $20 million a year. It's like you want to talk to a smart person in politics, call the White House. Talk to somebody there. Don't call your local county whatevers. Or your state whatevers even. Because they're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. Or they wouldn't be. I mean, I'm going to tell you stories in the future, and you're not going to believe me. But I'm going to tell it to you anyhow. And it's up to you, believe it or not. You can believe the stories I tell, or you can think I'm making it up. And that's okay. You know why? Because if somebody was telling me the stories that I'm going to tell you, I would think they're a liar, or they're crazy, or they were just making it up to sound big. And I'm going to tell you stuff, and it's up to you. If you believe it, guess what? You're one of me. You're a person who has the capacity to believe big and can go somewhere, and that if smart, intelligent, rich people get in front of you, they're going to suck you up and snap you up. But you know what? If you're trying stuff and it's not working and you're losing money and one business after another that you try out folds, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. Elon Musk is doing something right. He said, hey, what if we took camera batteries and stuffed 2,000 of them under the seats of a car? Do you think that would be enough power to propel the wheels and make them go down the road? And then the people just recharge them every day. Guess what? He's got a car company and rockets in space. Now, that takes a little doing. But obviously the guy's an engineer and he knows what the hell he's doing. And, he had a flub up. He doesn't talk about his failures. He had a failure. He had Solar City. Tried to sell everybody solar panels for the roof. And that company didn't go so well. The car company did. The space company did. And he's out there and he tries stuff and he's edgy. And he wants to be around people who are out there who try stuff and who are edgy. That's how you get your Thomas Edisons and your Henry Fords and you say Donald Trump is nuts? Yeah, he is. I'll agree with you. The man is crazy. You just listen to the man talk for about half an hour. He'll stand up there and repeat himself and just, boy, this is going to be a beautiful hotel. Great big beautiful hotel. What a beautiful hotel. I'm telling you, it's going to be a great big beautiful hotel. You know what? The guy is stinking loaded. He's got billions. You know why? Because he's out there and edgy and he's confident and he takes a chance. And when something doesn't work and it screws up and it fails, he moves on. He doesn't, I don't know, there's just something different about Donald Trump's and Elon Musk's versus you or the guy down the street who said, boy, I sure wish I could be like that and do something. You can. You've got a purpose and a possibility you can do, and you're not doing it. Why aren't you doing it? I'll tell you why. Because you're afraid. You're afraid of failure. And you know what? Mario Andretti, the first time he ever hopped in a race car, I guarantee you he didn't win the first race he was ever in. Matter of fact, he only ever won one Indy 500. And everybody talks about him as one of the greatest racers on the planet. Well, he did win Formula One racing championships and all the other stuff. And I mean, he won at a lot of other races besides the Indy 500. But, they don't look at his losses. And guess what? He doesn't usually win. When he raced, he didn't win most of the time. He won some of the time. I mean, he was hot. It's like a baseball player. What's considered a good batting average? You know how the numbers run. It's not even half. It's not even 1 out of 2. So, gosh, you only need one success. Do you know the record companies turned down the Beatles when they came around to them? They said, oh, these guys are going nowhere. The music is hackneyed and it's simple. And who's going to buy the Beatles records? And the record company that turned down the Rolling Stones in England. This is a true story. It's a true story about the Beatles, and it's a true story about the Rolling Stones. They were turned down. Nobody wanted to put them on their label. And one label finally said, I forget which label it was, they said, we're gonna sign you. We will record your music and put it out. But that lead singer you have, that Mick Jagger guy, he's got to go. You got to get a better singer. They don't know what they're doing. See, the record labels don't know what they're doing. Television and movie production studio executives, they don't know what the hell they're doing. They're just out there trying stuff. Sometimes it sticks to the wall, and sometimes it just falls down, and it's just a big pile of poop at the bottom of the wall. But they keep on going. And see, that's the thing about